But critics and reviewers are the only people who are not going to pull punches about the way they feel.
He said it here, guys.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, welcome to the capsule. We are back again, as we are every week. This week I have two special guests. Every week I have two special guests, but this week I have two special guests who are extra special. I have Rawlinson and Lisa Chearles.
Hey.
Hello.
The reason they are here is because Sai invited me to come and see a show at the place last Friday.
Yes.
Last Friday, yeah. I was like, I need your help on this. And he said to me, if you want to come and see the show, that'd be great. Also, I know you have this podcast where you give opinions, and you're more than welcome, he says, to give your unfiltered opinion. I'm ready for it. Give me your thoughts. So, me being me, I was like, wicked. I get to be unfiltered, and someone's given me, I do it when I don't get permission. So when I get permission, I was ready. I was like, okay, I'm gonna be really honest. I'm gonna like not pick it apart, but I'm gonna analyze. I'm gonna watch it and analyze and be like, okay, what is it I don't like, and all this. And I was ready to come here with whoever guests we had this week or the regulars, and I was ready to pick apart the show and analyze it and say, here's all the things I didn't like, because I find myself critical of theatre and hip-hop theatre in general.
Myself
just because it's something that is like close to my heart, and I love when it's done well. So I was ready, basically. I was ready to come in here and pick it apart. Then I said to Sai, damn it, because I fucking love the show. It was really good. And I was like, well, I can't analyze it and pick it apart, so you're going to have to come here and interview with me in place of not letting me have fun to pick apart your show.
Oh, well, that's really lovely for you to say. There's definitely stuff that's criticizable about the show.
We can get there.
I'm pretty happy. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I'm exceptionally happy about how Yukiko, Lisa, and Jamal performed. So in terms of that, it's great. But we made a show which was like theater and dance, interdisciplinary stuff, and really trying to push what little budget we had to make it feel like a full theater show. So I was aware that I'm coming into this cultural space where we're going to be compared to not only all the best dance in London, but also all the best theater. And as much as I went in like fairly confident, I also knew that we were going to take some flack, and it's been an interesting process for me, because all the shows that I've done in the past, you don't really get that much review. Like if you have a couple of nights in a venue, no one's coming to review it, because you normally have press people who invite critics and reviewers in, so you get those reviews in order to sell tickets for a longer run. So PR, because we had PR, we decided to pay for PR for the show, and they were like, we don't normally do this. Why are you doing this? And one was like, okay, we should try and get good reviews, because if we make a tour in the future, which is like trying to think ahead, instead of having shows that do a few nights and then just disappear, how do you make a tour? And a big part of that is like, reviews really help. It helps your show get into venues. It helps sell the thing. But it also means like, I'm also not used to like, the day after, when I was like reading through the reviews, being like, this is what I asked for.
And now here it is.
And now here it is.
So, okay. So for people at home who have no idea what's going on, let's give them a little rundown. So can you maybe give me a rundown of what the show was, your role, Lisa's role, the other roles, like give me a little breakdown for someone that's never seen it or heard about it. What is it?
Sure. So Saving Face is, should I be talking at the camera or you?
Both. We're all here. You're all here with us. Yeah. Whoever you want to aim it at.
All right. I'll do a mix. welcome you guys in. So Saving Face is a show which is about 4 people who are in an office. It's kind of a generic office. We don't ever mention really what we're doing or why. And there's a restructuring happening. So all of them start to realize that their jobs are on the line. All of them have some kind of private struggle. And it's based a lot about my previous experience, current experience, my experience of having an autoimmune disorder. So I've had this disorder my whole life. And for the longest time through my teenage years and my 20s, I was in and out of hospital all the time. On all kinds of medication, immunosuppressants, like pretty strong stuff. And my health was always a mess, but I was always trying to work through it. So I've been working for companies, choreographers. I was doing a show with Gary Clark, who's amazing. And I remember moments where he'd be like talking in my face and like slowly falling asleep because I have been unable to fall asleep the night before. And it's just weeks of sleep deprivation and literally thinking, I'm going to get fired. He's going to fire me. What is he thinking? And lots of other little experiences. I did a show with Dixon. I'm like kind of, not to name drop, but just to like, to say that there were stakes there. You know, like these are people who I admire so much. And I had to put on moisturizer like literally every half an hour because my skin would just like dry out crazy, to the point that if I was walking around in London, I'd have to find like a McDonald's toilet and like be in there taking my clothes off whilst people are like banging on the door and be like, oh my God. And I remember Dixon trying to like do contact work and being like literally like sliding off me and being like, bro,
yeah,
like you can't do this, it's dangerous. And I'm like, I don't know. And 1,000 other experiences like that where it's both horrible, but it is funny. And there were other people in my life who were going through things, people with like family bereavement, money troubles, like anxiety. And I found it interesting that often in our lives, we're presenting this perfect version of ourselves. But everyone has this stuff that's going on. And I wanted to kind of make a show that both celebrates that, but is predominantly also just funny and joyful to watch.
Yeah, that's what I like as well, because it's very a unique perspective and it's a really cool one, I think, especially why it connected with me, but like that you chose to do it comedically, because even just now you said like it's funny, but it's only funny because you framed it that way. Because there's so many, what you've just described, there's so many people that could have ended that and been like, you know, this is the most horrible, upsetting thing. And of course it's not great, but the way you've chosen to see it is like, how funny is this juxtaposition of me working and having this thing and in the McDonald's toilets? And it's like that unique perspective. I mean, we always say this with art, but like the unique perspective is what makes something special, I think. So the fact that you have that unique perspective on something that, you know, could not be funny at all if you wanted to think of it that way.
And I think that's also a big challenge, like looking at what the show is after we made it. I'm so glad we took so much effort to make something that was even coherent and like made sense. And thank God, like Lisa and Jamal, Yuki were always questioning, like, I don't think my character would do this. I don't think my character would think this. And a lot of that kind of dialogue of trying to create making real characters also meant that there's a balance there of like, how dark do we go? Because we're all mostly, I mean, I don't know about Lisa, and I kind of want to ask you a little bit about it in a sec. But we're all in a place where we've processed things. So like Jamal has, I think it's okay for me to say, but he's had, you know, some challenges with his father in the past, and part of his character was based around that. But he's like processed that. He's gotten through it. It's hard to go back to a place where things are actually difficult. And for me as well, like I've processed it now, but there's a lot of stuff which was much harder, you know, things that touches on feelings of suicide when it was really tough and I was always ill, thinking like, well, if it doesn't get better, then, you know, it's a lot to talk about, but considering ideas of suicide, which I can only talk about now because I'm in a much better place. I know Lisa's had some very challenging stuff. But yeah, I don't know if I was capable as a director to ask everyone to go there. And one of the criticisms that I had from the show, and I think it's totally valid, is that for a theater show, there should be maybe more depth. I kind of resonate with that. Like, there should be more gravitas, there should be more risk. Out of all the shows, like, nobody dies, nothing.
Risk maybe, but like depth is I would argue is like, that's subjective. So what does depth mean? Because for me, I saw a lot of depth in what you were doing, but it was just through comedy and through the layers of the character work. Whereas like, I also think, I don't know who gave that review, but like, I also think which is something that irritates me a lot, is that there's some like conventions within like theater, within hip hop theater, even in the battle scene, there's these conventions, and it's like, it's almost like unspoken rules of like, we don't do things that way. And for me, that is what that says to me, is like, oh, but we don't do things like that. We don't make jokes in a theater. We do deep, dark things in a theater. You know what I mean? And it's this type of thing where it's like, because you don't fit what we expect of you. And that's maybe partially why I love the show, because I was like, fuck, I came expecting something like, oh, okay, it's a hip hop theater show. I don't think I'd really seen much of you, but maybe like Open Heart Surgery or something, but not like bigger shows. So I was like, okay, I have some sort of preconceived notions of like, all right, I think I have an idea of what hip hop theater makers make, right? And then it was none of that. And I think that's why I loved it. And I think conversely, you can have these traditionalists who are like, a theater should be like this. And it's like, what is depth? What is gravitas? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, true. And I think I'm really trying to figure that out. Is it just writing? Because I think there's something beautiful about just normal everyday struggle that you don't have to necessarily go deeper. I mean, if we had gone through the process, because you were the person who I only just got to meet, and I had a lot of conversations about with Yuki about her experiences with like leadership and anxiety around that, which definitely fed into her role. I talked to Jamal about his relationship with parents and how that might find its way into the show. And then with you, like, I think you also have like a really interesting story. And I wonder how comfortable you would have been to explore some of the things that you found challenging, like if we were to go back in time.
Well, I mean, interestingly, I mean, we were just talking about this. Like, I think Jamal and I spoke about how, considering this show was written prior to you having met me, Jackie's character really mirrors a lot of aspects of who I am. I mean, the first day I walked into the studio, I was crocheting and talking about how I had I'd left my darning needle back in Manchester, and that was something that was like weighing on my mind. And like Jackie of all people would crochet, and she would also worry about having left her darning needle in Manchester. You know what I mean? And I mean, I don't know. I have thoughts about depth and gravitas in theatre as well. I can't really say so much for hip hop theatre, I think, because to be honest, my background is more contemporary dance than anything else. But I've seen
here, just so you know, here on the Capsule, we welcome opinions on things you know nothing about.
Oh, amazing!
one might even say
the tea, and I don't even know what the tea is.
One might even say it's our speciality.
Well, here we go then, because I feel like I've seen so many contemporary dance pieces that discuss really heavy themes, and if anything, I think it lacks depth when you show heaviness as heaviness. Because that's almost the surface of it, really, because it is we talk about lots of heavy shit in the show, like dealing with a chronic condition is heavy, dealing with OCD is heavy, you know what I mean? It's like all of this is we know that's heavy. And like you mentioned this once to Yuki in rehearsals, you were like, it's more interesting to watch someone resist crying than to see someone actually cry. And that's because what we do in life is make light of things. Like, we don't really walk into a McDonald's and then break down weeping, or at least I try not to, but it has happened before. Like, we spend most of our time resisting the urge to openly weep in public. So that's what really resonates with people, is like the girl, I want to throw this box, and then maybe I don't. Well, Jackie eventually does, but
Yeah, and it's like you have
Yeah.
that empathy because you've been in that situation way more than you've broken down crying. Probably.
exactly, yeah, that's
And-
the everyday.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I really love that outlook because that's so how I feel. It's unbelievable. That like just, I think there's that in the sense of like showing something heavy is just like, it's maybe it's the most obvious option, right? And I think the other thing with that is that what really annoys me as an audience member when I go and see these is like, okay, and I say this when I work sometimes at the University of East London, and we do like choreography stuff with the students and like feedback on their work and stuff. And this is something I've told them before, that is like, if you just show me that something's terrible, right? Like they're very, a lot of people, and I find a lot of young makers are tempted to do these really huge topics, right? So they're like, I'm going to do a dance piece about racism, and it's a 4.5 minute hip hop piece, but I'm going to solve racism in it, right? And what tends to happen is they just go, basically what they're saying with the piece is, look how bad racism is. And it's like the whole thing is something really bad happening to some minority. And then it goes, the end, enjoy. And it's like, what journey have you taken me on? What have you added to the subject? All you've said is racism is bad, or autoimmune diseases are tough, or whatever. And it's like, okay, like, thanks. I knew that already. You know, it's like, if I was, I don't know, giving a TED talk and I just put up a picture of Martin Luther King and said, he's a good guy, see you later. Like, it's like, okay, there's no need for you to exist kind of thing. Like this piece of art didn't need to exist. It didn't change anything. And I think what I love about what you're saying is like, with these heavy topics, it's very easy to just go, heavy topic, here you go, you deal with it. And what films or like kind of more experienced makers in any medium do is they take you on a journey, they explain something to you in order to show you a different perspective, or tell you something, or tell a specific story within that, you know. Like what's the thing on the Central Park 5, I don't know if you've seen that on Netflix.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's like a story about these black kids that got racially profiled and in New York in the whenever. But it's like, okay, we know racism is bad, but here's a very specific story about how bad the ramifications can be. Great. Or here's a cautionary tale over why we shouldn't think like this. Cool. But not just racism is bad. You know what I mean? And I think that's what the show did brilliantly, is not just give me 4 topics and go, these things all suck.
Yeah.
That's where I think you do have depth and you do have layers to it.
Well, thanks. And I think what I find interesting is that there's truth from every perspective. So as much as there's reasons why, from my own personal experiences, like you can excuse some of my behavior. So like being really tired, or just, you know, being ill in general, or being incapable to execute maybe as well as I could. Some of that stuff is still on me. There's like, if I'm allergic to all food, but if I just ate like rice and beans, but before I was on the medication that I'm on now, like I would feel a lot better. It's just very hard to eat like rice and beans, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day of your life. So every now and again, I'd have like a bite of a chocolate biscuit, which would ruin me. So there's this feeling like I'm also responsible for this stuff. There are things I could do to improve. And I like that kind of dialogue where you look at my character, Sam, who's got an autoimmune condition like myself, and I want the audience to actually think like, okay, maybe there are reasons why he's a bit ill, but also he also can just be bad at his job. And I think that's that to me is an interesting conversation. It's like how much we are generous to people and how much we also have to be accountable for ourselves, regardless of the situation that you're in.
That's just a well-rounded character, really. Because I mean, in truth, it's like all of us deal with shit, but also that each of us personally know deep down we could be doing more. Or we could be doing more to solve our problems. We could be, you know what I mean? Like there's that kind of like accountability that you're talking about is part of what makes these characters real. Also, because one of the reasons why when people make grand pieces about huge topics and tell you they're bad is that it often kind of verges on feeling a bit self-indulgent. It's like they put themselves on this pedestal and then they're like, look at me telling you about how this is bad. And then we're kind of here like, we know.
Some
right?
of us
Like,
know more than you even,
yeah,
depending on what the thing is,
So actually what has the most value on a stage often is like, it's not the pedestal, it's not, look at this, like presenting almost like a TED talk, but really more like, this is me. This is the shit, this is like Jackie is dealing with a lot, but also she fully threatens a person. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's to some extent, maybe there were people in the audience who were like, I would have done that. And then like, what does that say about us as people?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's very, I think it's a very positive way to like see the show, but I do think critics do have value in a way that I think some artists try and get really defensive around it. But critics and reviewers are the only people who are not going to pull punches about the way they feel.
He said it here, guys.
Yeah. No,
I'm going to clip that for a real.
Stuff. Like, honestly, you could say anything and as long as it's a legitimate experience that you had, then I have to take it seriously because that was your experience. Even if I can say, okay, it's one person's experience, it's still reflective of an experience that someone had. And I do think something that I do resonate with is like, okay, well, maybe it doesn't need depth or gravitas in the terms of like someone, dying or anything like that. But how do you create gravitas around more everyday things? For example, like if you see a kid who's not been invited to, a birthday party or something like that, and you see how it destroys them. Like to us, it's like the kid will get over it. It's fine. But how do you bring people into that world? How do you tell that story where when you find out that kid didn't get invited, you're like, and you feel that your world crumble. And I think there's space for that. I don't want to disregard and be like, well, I was making a show which is supposed to be, just a celebration of people's fragility, and it's not supposed to tell any great or deep story, so they didn't get it. I think there is something they were looking for that I can work on if I get a chance to work on it, and if the reviews that came out hasn't made it harder to make the show.
I'm surprised you got any like negative. What is there other critiques of the show besides that one?
So like
I want to insult them all. I'm going to critique the critics.
We had a couple of really lovely reviews from The Stage and the Financial Times. Both of them are behind paywall, so no one will ever read them. They were both still 3 stars, which I think in the context of all the work that's been made in London is fine.
Sure.
But the things they said about the show, like in terms of the actual dance that was in it and the comedy and how it was well observed, is actually very, very encouraging. Yeah. And then there were 2 other reviews from the London shows, which basically said along the lines of, it was overridden. I didn't understand if it was a theater show or a dance show, and it didn't really excel at either, which I also, I think there's truth to that. Like, I do think
I'm resisting the urge.
I have amazing dancers, and like, I want there to be dance integrated everywhere. But again, I refuse to use this as an excuse, even though that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. But we had 3 weeks before we went into tech. We had 3 weeks to make a show, and honestly, we barely made it to make it like make sense at all.
But okay, so all right, so well, I think it's interesting because it's like a lot of these reviewers, right? The other thing for me is like, I want to know what your expertise is coming into this, because if your expertise is like contemporary dance and you're at Breaking Convention reviewing a hip hop show, I don't care what you have to say. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, similarly, I have this background in like hip hop and stuff like that. And then if I went to like if I went to see Crystal Pite or something and I said, this is terrible, it wasn't fun. You know what I mean? It didn't make me laugh, or it's like there was no backflips and no explosions. Like they'd be like, well, who is this idiot that doesn't know anything? But then when they are contemporary reviewers or they are acting theater reviewers and they come and see a show which is like a hip hop mix, whatever, then they have these criticisms of it, but no one says, but what are your credentials? Because that's just like, oh, we're the higher form of dance. So anything we have to say about any of these other cultural things it should ride. Do you know what I mean? Which is where I get a bit annoyed, because I'm like, not annoyed, but where I just disagree, to be honest. Because it's like, with the thing about, you know, the side of the show, which was like the acting theater type of thing, and it's more like a play. Like I saw it more like a comedy play with dance in it, right?
Yeah.
Because there was minimal dance, but actually the amount of dance was one of the things that I walked out of the theater saying, I loved that. I loved that you didn't overuse the dance. And it was like something that I have had an issue with for a while with like hip hop theater and stuff. It's like, okay, we do these styles, so we have to shove them down your throat at every opportunity. And so this is what I was saying, and I'm kind of tangenting, but that's another speciality of the capsule. So what I don't like about dance theater and hip hop theater, right, is like, if you're doing an abstract piece and it's just abstract and it's movement and it's like got a theme, fine. If you're trying to tell a story, dance is not the best storytelling medium, right? It doesn't convey a specific thing. It actually makes things more obscure, right?
Yeah,
it makes things
emotional, it's symbolic.
Yes, it's way more abstract. So what I don't like is when people try and tell a story, and for example, the two school kids are going to school. So they're going to dance going to school. They're going to dance getting ready. For me, you're taking something that if we take the most effective way to communicate that the kids are going to school would just be a text written or someone narrating saying the kids are going to school. Cool. I understood it like that. The next level down would be to act it out, right? So you act it out and I follow exactly what they're doing. I know what they're doing. They're going to school. Cool. Then like maybe 7 layers down later or 7 steps down of how easily it is to communicate that would be dancing, right? It's like you're making it way harder for me to understand. So what I don't like is when the whole show is that and then they say, oh, it was about this. And I'm like, well, of course I didn't understand that, because you used the dance all the way through and it is not an effective storytelling medium. However, what I loved about your show was the way that dance can be an effective communication method is to take the elements that are already abstract and use them to intensify the feelings behind them. So this is what I was blowing my mind. I was like, this is fucking genius. And I have more compliments to give you eventually.
Thank you.
But I was like, what you did was you took, so for example, all the bits that were needed to be established. So for example, relationships between the characters or the setting or what's happening or whatever, exposition, you gave through text, you gave through acting and all the kind of easy communication methods. Then it got to certain bits where, for example, you were falling asleep at work and trying to not act like you were falling asleep at work or these type of things, right? And you used that feeling, it's like as soon as we understand what's happening, we've understood it, right? He's falling asleep at work. Done. Like you've communicated it. But the abstract feeling or thought behind that is all the like, oh, I don't want to get caught, or oh, this is hard, or now I'm really tired, or someone's just talking at me and I'm falling asleep, and all these things that are like abstract feelings. And that little moment is what I feel like you stopped the narrative and went, here's an abstract moment. There's feeling behind this. This isn't just a straightforward communication. There's way more to this. Let's use the dance to expand that moment. And it's almost like I felt like you were going along and almost helping me to like zoom in on certain parts and then go back out to the rest of the narrative, zoom in. And it was like, you used it perfectly, because usually in dance theater, I find a lot of times, the dance halts the narrative. It's like, okay, I'm going to school. Let's pause that thought so I can show you a dance routine.
Yeah.
And yours progress the narrative.
And we really, really tried to avoid that. It was like the bits of dance had to tell the story in a way that if you remove them, the rest of the story didn't make sense anymore.
Yes, beautiful.
But yeah, I mean, I still think it's interesting because I do think there's something about audiences there, which you touched on, where like I am a hip hop artist, a hip hop theater maker, and I'm coming from that perspective. And weirdly, like, because I train and because I'm breaking often in rooms which has like the world's most elite dancers, as like Sunny, Vanessa, Cry6, all these people, like I'm so used to insanely high level dancing that it's impressive and amazing, but I also don't care. about it anymore. And I've had so many experiences seeing these incredible companies, and after 20 minutes, I'm like, you're all incredible, but also I don't really care anymore.
If everything's
and that's a
incredible,
really harsh criticism because
Yeah,
it's my
no,
genre, and I
100%.
love those dances and I love those shows.
No,
but
I'm with you.
also a part of me is like, I want a story.
If everything's incredible, nothing's incredible. It's like it has to be
that's
moments
really-
where it's like,
that's interesting.
you know what I mean? It's like let's say, you know, like the some of the jokes that got me the most were ones that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But if you're constantly trying to shove jokes down my throat,
Yeah.
nothing's funny. It's like stand-up comedians. They don't go joke, 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 joke. They go, here's a story and here's a thing and I'm describing this. Oh, there's the joke. And then it hit me. And I find that with the dance where it's like, you this is another reason why I loved it, because you kept it so small and you chose the moments well. It was like, I literally almost forgot that you guys could all dance. Like, and then when you did, I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, almost like, I was like, oh shit. Like, cause I'm just in the story and the acting, and then you start moving, and especially like say like the sleeping bit, and it's like, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that he's a breaker. Like this whole, I wasn't even in that mode. And I think that's the point. Like when you do these things where it's like a non-stop dance show, like you said, it's like, okay, like 5-10 minutes in, it's like, all right, backflips, this, that. Once you've shown me how strong you are, nothing, you know, it's like, I don't know, in contemporary things, like if you give away all the like flexibility and this and whatever at the beginning, what are you going to use to like surprise me after that? It's like, I know all the stuff you can do. You start the show with 27 pirouettes. I'm like, all right, well 3 isn't impressive after that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
And we talked a lot about breath when we were making the show. Well, this is Jamal's favorite thing, isn't it? Is breath, like in a show. And I think that's part of what, it's kind of what you're describing really, is that like the dance in a way that then it needed to breathe. Like if we had more dance in the show, we would either have to A, be longer, or B, be a much less complex storyline. And it's like, what do you want to, what gives then really? Because I mean, we already kind of exceeded the runtime that we had promised. That's that.
Well, I
And then
mean,
like,
that was like the original runtime, just so that I didn't stress you guys out. Because it's like,
but also it feels like a good amount of time.
Yeah.
Like I think any longer would have been like,
yeah, no, I think
A
1
6th
hour
day.
20
Yeah.
is maximum.
And I think just with what we had, like all the elements that were already at play, like it needed to be how much it was so that it could breathe. And also like you say, like if you want all the gravitas, and like you were saying, like dance isn't the medium that communicates like that necessarily tells very intricate stories in the most like effective way. It tells lots of things in incredibly effective ways. But if I'm trying to communicate the sentiment that is, when it rains, it stings my skin. I could express that physically, but also it's like one thing we kept working on in the show was anytime we had those moments of vulnerability and we open up, and that's like the thing, like you say, like the moment Timmy isn't invited to that birthday party and it crushes his very soul. It's like we integrated dance into that, but also sometimes it's saying it in a way that also expresses that vulnerability in the most effective way possible, so that the people in the audience can have that resonate with them.
I mean that's kind of why we did what we did. And we were talking a lot about grounding things, because when you have dance, some of the stuff I kind of wrote a bit too poetically, and then you're already doing this expressive, like quite beautiful stuff, and then if you come back and you're still in that space with words, it doesn't feel real. But I legitimately think that we could had maybe not necessarily dance, but movement. For example, every time the set moves, I think there's a way to make it feel like almost more surreal. Like there's like our movement within it is actually dance. So it moves, and like maybe someone can move on the floor whilst tables are moving in a way that it just like, again, I feel like we're searching for, well, just completely indulgently, I want to make a show that I would be like, this is fucking insane, for my mind to be blown. I think we made, I hope, like a good show, but I do think there's more opportunity to be surprising with movement. Some of the dialogue I think could have had some subtle use of movement. Some parts could actually have text and dance, not in a way where anyone should feel like, oh, now dance is happening, but where the modes that we normally use for storytelling are surprising in the same way as like movies that you love. I don't know, like they always do something a little bit clever that you don't expect and will probably be criticized in many ways. So I think, I don't know, I guess what I'm saying is that in some ways it was, I mean, we have limitations, but in some ways I played it a little safe, and I think I could have taken more risks.
Yeah, I mean,
there,
like you can always improve everything, especially with art, you know. It's like you can always improve it, but I would be hesitant to criticize you for things that I thought could be improved. Does that make sense? I think there's a difference between, oh, that could have been better, as in like something I'd look at and be like, oh, I didn't like this choice, or I didn't like the way they did that. Or it's just like, yeah, of course you can make this better. Like, could you make the transitions more smooth?
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
I mean,
it doesn't mean they weren't smooth.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously is small things.
Yeah.
But I do think there are ways that you can use like dance and text together, and a lot of people have done it before, but yeah, just to be more subversive. And
but even if you did use the dance and text together, then you maybe lose the element of the surrealism with the dance, because you know what I mean, because the whole thing of why, like, I don't want to give away too much, but it won't unless you see the show, but like when you're doing the thing of like falling asleep at work, you kind of turn the sleeping thing into dance, and until you past the point of like, it was quite a far point, right? So like, let's say you're talking and you're like falling asleep, right? It's like you did the normal nod off, and I was like, yeah, he's falling asleep. And it wasn't until you were really far over that I remembered you could dance. And then you started to do it, and I was like, oh, this is like a surrealism version of this. It's just like like, I would imagine that it's almost like that was like if that was a film, it would be like almost like that's the dream state, right? And it's like what's actually happening in reality during that whole time is literally just you doing this. But to illustrate that more, you took it into a whole thing, and because you hadn't been moving and stuff up until there, it really hit me hard. So that surrealism aspect, I think the more you work, I mean, what the fuck do I know? I shouldn't be saying anything, but like for me, it's like the more you work that into the rest of the show, the less those moments are surreal. They're more like, well, of course they can dance. This is a dance show. You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean,
we throughout the process, we talked a lot about how we're all dancers and not trained actors, and there was a little bit of this sense of like, playing it safe actually for us maybe as the cast would have been more dance, because that's what's safe for us, right? That was what we felt the most comfortable doing.
But you're also good. It's like it's one of those things where like people are also sometimes, I don't know, sometimes you just want to listen to the music, you know, and I feel like there are ways, I don't want to make the show longer, but for you guys to really like excel, there's something that's undeniable about watching people like just excel at what they're doing. And I think obviously to not use that in a way that I'm like padding the show or anything, as long as it's really justified. I just think there was probably, I don't know, half an hour dance maximum in a show that's an hour and 20. I think there's a way that in the very least, someone seeing the show who's asking themselves like, is it a acting show with some dance, or a dance show with acting, will at least be so blown away by the dance that they're like, well, I don't know what it was, but the dance was fucking incredible. And that question is not even on their minds. And I think...
Yeah. Well, I feel like we told that line fairly well. Like, I know what you mean in terms of like, if you're looking at the numbers, like duration wise, half an hour of dancing sounds about right. What's in the show? I got real sweaty and then I dried off, and I got real sweaty and I dried off again. So I know what you're saying. But I mean, I don't know. I think we could have maybe incorporated more of something that you were mentioning that you really enjoy, which is where we start to move as we are, I'm doing the thing. We start to move as we are speaking. And it's kind of like that thing where, like you say, it's like, where do you tip from acting into dancing? Like, because really it's all physical. So where do you draw that line? I think that was something interesting we could have played with more. But really also, I don't know. I feel like the balance was pretty good. And
why do I feel like I'm now like trying to criticize the show? And you guys
that's coming
like,
from somebody
no,
who's more than happy to be comfortable. If you told me to dance more in the show, I would have been, hell yeah.
This is where I agree with you, because like I feel like, because you said about taking more risks and not playing it safe, but I do feel like what you're saying is true, where it's like, as a dancer with 4 dancers on stage, the safe thing is to dance more. The risky choice is to say, we have half an hour of high level dance, let's raise the acting to that dance level. That's the risky thing for me, is like, how much can you go into the acting and like make sure, because I'm going to talk about you in a minute, because I have a lot of compliments for the acting and the comedy in it. But it's like, for me, especially, again, background wise, it's like, I know that I went there expecting dance, so I know it's high level. So if you had, well, it was pretty damn close. Like, it was funny, and I'm not an easy, like, I don't laugh easy at like comedy stuff unless it's like super like professional stuff. So I was like already expecting to not find it fun, and I genuinely laughed at almost all of the bits, and some of them really hit. And so it's like, even with the acting and all that stuff, it's like pushing that side for me is what's the risky thing, is because you're saying, I'm not an actor, I'm not a comedian, whatever, but damn it, we're going to make a funny show with a narrative.
And then so much of the acting, like we really approached the acting quite physically, didn't we? Because I don't know about I feel like that was a general sentiment for most of us was.
Well, I mean, that is our access point.
Yeah, that's our access point. That's what we find the easiest to just kind of understand. And we were kind of, personally anyway, like the emotions were easiest to feel physically, and then I let that then turn into something emotional. So in a way, we were already approaching the acting like dancers. And I think the thing with having more dance in the show, where it's like maybe the dance and the dialogue overlap, is like, is that then musical theater? I think the thing is, it verges on that in lots of ways.
But I don't think we like entirely knew what it was going to be until we made it. In terms of like the vision at the start, which was, I really love comedy as a mode to tackle difficult subjects, and I'd been playing with like a one-man show, which was about my experience with chronic illness, through breaking convention. So I definitely know I wanted to do comedy, and I wanted to then do dance, and I had this term which I call a dancicle, which is like a musical where instead of people break into song, they break into dance. So in terms of that, I think we exactly achieved it. But I do think like they're having kind of been able to digest a little bit. I think there's more. I think the difficulty is, okay, this is it. Those forms, a musical, a theater show, a dance show, are so well understood. There's so much precedence. There's so much work that really nails those genres, that creating something that's like new, I honestly think it is my responsibility as a director to prove that conviction. Like, I think if someone says like, I don't know what it was, and that you weren't excelling at either, I think that's fair. I mean, for all audience, like, I hope they actually had a good time, and that's kind of the main thing. But I do think, like, when I look at other companies that have been able to do interdisciplinary work, like Deviate, Frantic Assembly, those companies, they really had to create their own voice. So I do think like it is a little bit stacked against me, but also I think that's a really exciting challenge. I think as a hip hop artist, the work was made for an audience that was hip hop literate, because it should have been felt. It should feel like, wow, there's a refreshing amount of dance in this show, rather than like, why is there so much talking in this dance? Like, so.
Well, I think that like, so this is the thing. Like, I think that would be I would love to take, like, I could take my mum to see that show. She doesn't know anything about dance and doesn't really care. So like, that's something that I would take. Yes. And there's so many hip hop theater shows I would not like. I have taken my parents to, and they were like, meh.
And that's also the aim is like, how do you bring people into a story where I want to talk about like anxiety and OCD and illness? Is like, I can't do it with dance. Nobody other than like other dancers, literally only dancers will appreciate this, or reviewers who watch dance. And I'm like, I don't, for better or worse, I don't want to do that. Yeah.
And I think, first of all, not to say, I don't think you shouldn't do the dance and text thing or anything like that. I just don't think you should do it if you don't want to do it. If you're doing it because you think the show needs more dance or blah, 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 for audiences or whatever, then I don't think you should do it. Obviously, you've done a great job up until now, so do go with your instincts. But I think my thing would be like, don't let the critics change what you think about the show. Because for me, like, and I was saying to Jenny, my partner, like, that yours is a type of show that, like, I don't know exactly why, but I would love to do like assistant directing work, or, you know, like this type of thing, because I've done some like assistant choreography stuff before, and I love doing it in general, even with dance shows. But like, I don't know why, but I'm like, I would have so many ideas for this show, and I always think that anyway, you know.
Yeah, because there's stuff to play with, because it's fun.
But I don't think I'd change the format. That would be my, like, if you ask my honest, like, all right, I can do anything I want with this show. Let's say you were like, fill in for me directing wise, just do whatever you want with it. I'd be like, okay, I might change this, I might have a preference on this. I'd keep the format exactly the same. I'd just go into the sections and change, maybe like, I think this could be done in this section or this or whatever, you know. Maybe with more time looking at it, I might make certain adjustments. But my initial thought walking out of there was, of all the things I could change or add to or put my ideas on, I wouldn't, from a director or assistant choreographer point of view, I don't think I'd change the format of it. I think the amount of dance you had in there, how many jokes you had, and this is brings me on to something I wanted to ask you about, is that, like, so you wrote everything?
Yes, but
okay,
and this is kind of interesting. I'm sure Jamal is okay me saying this. I wrote it in the knowledge that maybe no one would want to speak lines.
Oh wow!
So I was writing this thing, and I have a very bad habit of like writing through the night. So I'd start at like 7 p.m. and then finish at like 2 p.m. And I actually made my partner cry at one point because she was like, "You're gonna die."
Yes.
And there's a mixture of like wanting to write something that's, you know, very strong, and you have to put in a certain amount of hours and do a number of drafts to do that. But also constantly in the back of my head was the fact that a week before the show, Jamal called me and was like, "You should find someone else to do the show." And I was a bit gutted, because I'm like, I've seen his work for years, Yukiko as well, I've seen her work for years. They just have such a wonderful presence on stage that is what I wanted in the show, regardless of, you know, whether he'd do lines or not. And he was like, "I think you should find someone who can act, because I'm not confident with it. I don't have that experience." And I think he was just trying to take care of me in many ways, which is like really lovely. And then I had to like kind of talk him through, and I was like, well, obviously if you don't want to do it, don't do it. That's fine. And eventually I got him in. And one of the reasons that I managed to convince him was like, you know, I'll just make sure that you only say like one words, or like we'll devise it, and you'll only say as much as you're comfortable with. And the same with Yukiko. I was like, oh, yeah, you'll have like a few minutes talking each, and we'll find it in the room.
Lies.
And then as I was just writing, and then came in the start, I was like, okay, so Yukiko has 1,000 lines.
How many pages was it?
But legitimately, I was prepared for people in the room to be like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad it worked out the way it did, because I think for me, one of the writing, again, it's like I find myself, because I feel like I've known you for quite a long time. I know of you and you as your dancer and your work for a long time at least, and I'm like, has he always been this good and I just haven't known about it? Or was this like, because I was watching it and I was like, who wrote this? Like, I think it's so well written, right? Like,
thanks, man.
The dialogue, I think, is, and of course you can always like touch stuff up or whatever, but like, I think the dialogue is really well done, and I have a big issue with like badly done dialogue. And in general, movies, theater, whatever. And I think it was really well done and really like authentic. But what I loved about it was the like, it was, I don't know, it was so like maturely written. Like there was so many things, everything that you set up had a payoff. And it's like, I don't know how, because I also, for full transparency, I'm a super nerd on like video essays on YouTube. It's like, it's my reality TV. I just put on like, here's why this film was good, here's why this film was bad, here's why dialogue by Aaron Sorkin is amazing, and here's why, I watch maybe like hours per week, right, of these things. And so I'm starting to accidentally build up like knowledge of stuff, and it's something that I don't know if a normal person, because I'm so lost in this wormhole of YouTube now, I don't know if normal people recognize these things. But there's so many moments, for example, without spoiling anything, the milk thing.
Milk.
The milk thing only paid off. So, and that got like a round of applause. People laughed. There were people that clapped. The only reason that was so funny is because you set it up earlier. Like that by itself is like,
I love that bit.
You know, it's like a, there's a moment with the milk where what we're talking about and alluding to, where it's like a way to get payback to the boss, right? But it's like the only reason that you getting payback to the boss, because we all like knew what would happen in that moment. Even if you miss the setup, it's still like, yeah, you got her, it's funny, like blah, blah, blah. But because it was so set up at the beginning of like, this is something that's important to me, when it was paid off, whether it's subconscious or conscious, like it really hit extra. And every moment I think that I could remember that you set up had a payoff later down the line. And like the relationship was used to throw back in her face when there was an issue. And it's like everything was like set up, payoff. And it was really effective like that. And the payoffs weren't just jokes out of nowhere, which again is something I have an issue with 10 times more in like dance theater, but like it's just in general when it's like, you know, like I'm trying to think of something like a Amy Schumer movie or something, you know, those kind of cheat, like, almost like Bridesmaids or something, where it's like, oh, the woman got drunk and the funny joke is she throws up in the taxi, and it's
I
like,
actually really like Bridesmaids.
okay, right.
I think that's a great film.
But I'm just trying to think of the first one.
That
in
has
my
some
head.
problematic moments now that it's aged a little, but
Of course, what movie doesn't?
Yeah, it's true.
But you know those type of things where it's like, all right, the funny thing is that just something crazy happened, and that's it. There's no reason for this contextually to be extra funny. It's just, oh, she threw up on some guy's face. Okay, yeah, oh, that's funny. I'm not saying from Brian, whatever. Yeah. And I think what the more clever comedy is, like you set up the breadcrumbs, and then when the thing happens, you're like, oh, because of the like that's why it's funny. And I was like so impressed by that, and also the fact that you juggled not only 4 characters with, it's like you had the 4 characters, you had the issues that they were all struggling with, and there was interpersonal dynamics between all 4 of them, and I understood everything. And there was no like, who's he again? Why is there too much happening? And what's their relationship? It was so like everything. And even when like, you know, let's say you two's relationship, and then when you two were interacting, I was like, oh, but she knows about that relationship. So this and that means that, and now their thing is heightened because you know, it's like all of these things played off each other so well. And I'm really like, when I'm switched off, I'm switched off as an audience member. If I'm like, if I don't like something, I don't like it.
Yeah, I was like fall asleep a lot in shows.
Yeah. Oh, so bro.
And it's so like warm and dark as well. Like,
and big bassy shows. It's like, it's warm, it's dark, and you got happening. I'm like, I've fallen asleep so many times.
now I just embrace it. I used to fight it.
Yeah,
now
just
I'm like,
out.
yeah.
But yeah, all that to say is like I was so in, and I understood everything, and I was really, you know, and I'm people that watch a capsule now, I'm not trying to be nice because I would say it if I didn't like it, you know, but like I really understood everything. I thought it was super well written. Yeah, I obviously, you know, especially from,
I mean, a lot of that is, again, it was weird because like Jamal, Yukiko, yourself, not coming into the space as actors, but they were the ones who all the time were being like, it doesn't make sense for me to do this. And then we'd rewrite together. We'd try different lines. Yeah. There were bits like right on the Thursday, like we were changing stuff so that it made
significant
made sense. But like, how did you find it? Like, did you feel like a lot of the way through you just letting me direct? So like, when was the point where you're like, no, I need to change this? Or did you feel comfortable from the start? Also,
for me / the audience, can you give a bit of background on you? And so you have no acting experience or some?
Oh man, well, I wouldn't say I have acting experience. I've been in children's shows where I've had to use my face a lot. But apart from jaw pain, I would say no. Okay.
So maybe give us a little background on yourself as well.
Oh, okay.
Just in terms of what you have studied or haven't studied, or where you're like, who you are.
Wow. Well, background. I'm not originally from the UK. I moved here 5 years ago. I grew up in Singapore. Okay. So interestingly, or maybe not so interestingly, at home, the pressure to be academically inclined is...
I've heard this, yeah.
...is all-consuming. And I was very much ready to be a lawyer, and then I bargained down to being a journalist. And then at some point I was like, I gave my parents the ultimatum of, if I get into a dance school, you'll let me go. And I love them. They had very little faith in me, so they just let me try. And when you look at that, I got into a school. So they told me I was going to go, so I did. And
do they still resent you for the setup?
Well, they did come visit just last year, actually, and witnessed me performing professionally. So they now know my jobs are not a ruse; they are real. I've shown them reviews, so they know they're real. And I think they're slowly accepting that I'm kind of making this work, kind of. And yeah, I think so. I really only started dancing contemporary at like 13, which I don't know, depending on who you are, that's either old or young, right? Because everybody starts at very different stages in life. But yeah, I started dancing contemporary at 13, and then did more pre-professional training at like 15, and then came here and I did a degree at Northern School of Contemporary Dance in Leeds.
Do you know, were you in a similar year to Max?
Yeah, he was in a year above me.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and then we were very much, well, they were a COVID year, we were a COVID year as well. So it was a schooling experience rife with COVID and testing. But I mean, also at some point, while I was in the midst of my contemporary training, I'm not going to call it hip hop, because I don't think it really was. Yeah. But what it was myself and friends, we would lift full dances of YouTube, just like learn them in the reflection of storefronts, so not windows.
Been there.
But like we'd like find like a hot pot restaurant that was like not open, and so the glass would be reflective, and then we just like dance in the glass and learn full routines, and then just perform them like it was our choreography. It was not. And that was like my training. Essentially,
you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. We just kind of taught each other, and then we touched on lots of different bits. So I know like the teeniest, tiniest bit of tutting because I learned it of a YouTube video. The teeniest, tiniest bit of whacking because I learned it of a YouTube video. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to learn some break before I found it, because I started when I was 20, which is definitely considered old. But trying to learn break off the internet is the worst. So I injured myself so bad. Yeah. So kids at home,
yeah,
find a teacher.
You were very ambitious. I focused on the upper body.
Same here. And so what was your question about the, like, how was it interpreting the acting and the characters, and how did you navigate that?
Well, I think, the thing is, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere without a script to start with, right? So having that basis was obviously vital, because also we, like you say, we're dancers. We come in, you tell us to play a character, and really what we're doing is just drawing from a mix of personal experience and like physical sensations to access emotions. So we needed something to start with. And then I think when we started getting to a point where we were finding parts of ourselves that were reflected in our characters, and I could start to be like, look, Jackie is kind of an anxious wreck, and so am I. And I know I wouldn't have, is this a spoiler? I wouldn't have threatened someone in a position of power unless I had been pushed to the brink, you know? And then that was kind of what prompted like our conversation about, would Jackie do this? Or what would push Jackie to do this? So yeah, in a way, actually not being actors or like trained as actors probably really vastly improved the show. I
mean, because I guess it seemed like especially, you know, like Jamal was like, he really needed to understand his character to be able to do it at all. And I think if I had hired an actor who could dance a bit, they would have just done it without been like, look, I can't do it unless I know why.
Yeah.
So that was really, really valuable. And I think yourself as well.
I don't know if he told you, but when I asked him about doing the pod, I asked if you could come as well, because I was like, I have to meet you and talk to you, because I walked out of there and I was like the show was amazing. I was like, this is cool. I had a great time actually. And I was like, that girl who plays Jackie is so fucking good. I was like, she is a star. Like I was like actually blown away by your performance. Like all of you guys are like the whole show was great. But there's like, I'm surprised that you haven't done acting before, because like your delivery of it was so good, and you're really, really funny as well. And like, I think it's so hard for me. Like, I've watched so many plays or whatever or even like, like plays where people are trying to be funny and the writing's decent and stuff. I'm just like, oh, this is so like forced or whatever. But your delivery of the jokes was like, I don't know if it's like you changed it to like your humor. Like, obviously we've just met today, so I don't know your humor yet. But like, I don't know if you changed it to like, this is how I would deliver this joke, or even like change lines in the script or something. But it felt so, like there's one, what is it that you said where you're like, there's something I can't remember. Wait, there's like one funny word and you delivered it in such a funny way that was like, it's not even a joke. Like, it's just, you just said it in a funny way, but it's like, because it was so natural, I was laughing the whole show.
There are a few bits that are also just imposed.
Really?
I think Jackie's character has quite a few of those bits.
Oh, like,
and they
they
always crack me up as well.
Can you
just like anytime, especially when there's dancing going on. So for example, when we're throwing Jackie the boxes and we're like, Jackie, like all this stuff.
All
I
of
love
that text is just me.
so much.
Why can't you just hand them to me was me in like a true moment of like, genuinely, why can't you just
and I think you did a really good job. And again, I don't know how much of a mix it is between the acting or your choices in the directing, but for example, there were bits like that where the whole thing is supposed to be chaos, right? And I thought that even you guys' lines, it's you and Yuki, right, that do the Jaggy like that was delivered really well, right? But then also there's the way that you're like muttering to yourself, which I was like mid audience, I think, and it's like we can just about hear you. And it's like the perfect volume, because it's like if you were shouting it, it's like you're really trying to deliver like, and why aren't they doing this? And why aren't they? It's like, all right, you're overacting it. And then there's underacting where we don't even really hear it. But there was just the right amount that we could hear words. And it's like, it was literally like a fucking bullshit. Like, we hear that, like, you know, and it's like, it was so well done that I was like, this is perfect. I know you're not delivering it to us, but I can hear you enough to find it funny. And then the bits that you wanted to stand out, you lifted just a little bit higher. And I was like, this is killing me, because it's so funny, because it's like real, you know.
And I think that's one definite victory from the show is that the response from audiences and reviewers, like, the acting is always positive. Like no one's like, they didn't quite hit that or couldn't quite deliver. Like, no one even mentioned that there were dancers trying to act or anything.
No.
And
comedy is hard, man. Like, me and Jenny were talking about this. Like, it's so not to be like, I don't know what the word is, but like turn your nose up at it. It's like, it's way, like, even what you said, rather than just dropping heavy shit. Like, this is one pet peeve I have, is like every hip hop theater show is just like side lights come on, it's just someone breathing heavily in the darkness, and then there's just like a and it's like it's just like, this is every fucking show I go to watch, and it's like, all right, cool, like we can all do that, we can all like scream on stage, we can all like, no, don't touch me, and like, okay, cool, but make me laugh genuinely. It's like, that is a hard, man.
It's scary. I definitely,
in writing and delivery, it's both need to be in sync as well.
And I think all of us, before the first show in Leicester, we're like, I don't know if it's funny. Just like, I'm just like, I think it makes me laugh, but also.
But is it like also the more you sit with the material, the less it has that impact, because you know what's coming?
A little bit, but you just, I think at this point, having done the 4 shows and having done like basically a stand-up show for Breaking Convention, I am at a point now where I can trust that if I think something's funny, 90% of the time it will be on some level funny. But before, it's like, I just don't know. And like, dance is so much safer because of that. It's like, if I do Mill Flair 90s, it's like, it is by culture good. It is like, it has a value that you need to.
But to play devil's advocate, if I said to you, Sai, do a show for like mums and kids and families, right? Yeah. And I said, but do breaking. You'd know how to do the breaking show to make it impressive, right? So you know universally what's looked at as impressive outside of the culture of breaking. Like, okay,
backflips
look cool, spinning stuff looks cool, strength stuff looks cool, right? but I think that's because you've refined your knowledge of breaking, but also breaking in relation to an audience, right? So it's like you've seen it performed in loads of different spaces, breaking convention, battles, theatre showcase, and you've seen what gets a reaction. But I think maybe with the comedy, what a lot of people don't get, and when it's their first time, it's like we think that everybody has like this false conception, is that the right word? False concept, I guess, that perception maybe is what I'm trying to say, that they understand humor because they made their friends laugh, or because they've laughed in a social, and because it's something that we do socially all the time, you think, oh yeah, comedy, I know what that is. But it's actually comedy as an art form, I think, is almost removed. Like, you can make your friends crack up, but then when I say write a joke, it's like it's a whole different ballgame. Or like,
and write a joke that someone that's outside of your friend group will understand.
Because a lot of our jokes realistically in the friend groups are like, remember that thing that we all experienced, like, oh yeah, what are you, water fountain? And then it's like someone goes, oh yeah, but it's like, that's not funny if we don't get it. So it's the setup, it's all that. And I think what you're saying now is like, because you've refined your understanding of comedy as an art form, and I think it's like, not to be sneered at, like the work that you've done in order to get yourself to this point. It's not by accident that show was funny. It's like you've done work to make it land like that.
I guess. And like the last thing I did with, like, I kind of did an open art where I'm a big fan of stand-up, and a big fan obviously of dance. So I was just like, see if I can put them two together. And definitely the first scratch was like half the jokes landed and half the jokes which I thought were hilarious like were silence. It's just crickets. And I was like, oh, okay.
Interesting.
What's the difference? And then I like reworked it, and
well, that's what, I watch a lot of stand-up comedy as well, and like all my podcasts that I watch are all comedians, and like they talk so much about how important bombing is. It's like you have to go up on stage and just see what works and what doesn't. And I guess it's similar as well to like, if you want to be good in hip hop, at least, like you need a battle, and you need to go out and fail, and you need to be smoked to be good. So definitely I learned from that experience of being smoked a lot to like, just try comedy. So I think I'm kind of happy with the way the comedy stuff went out. And
the interaction of the audience was so vital, because we had shows where audiences were more vocally responsive, and then ones where they were quieter,
laughing. Okay,
like just and it's also like, it's how you laugh almost, because there's some audiences you can see them smiling, but they're kind of doing like the
yeah.
And then there were the shows where people were doing like the ha, and I'm like, that's what we need. Like from the stage, that energy was so important to like bounce off of, because it's so hard to do a show where there are jokes that we know are meant to be funny, but also there are bits in the show that audiences found funny before that weren't even meant to be bits.
Oh, like what?
Gosh.
What? There was I find this with comedy, but it's like, there was some people around me in the audience who were like laughing, and I'm like, this isn't a joke. Like, stop laughing. Like, he's like, and it was like, some bits were like, you had just made a joke, but then now you were doing something that I knew was like serious, and they're laughing at this, and I'm like, this is the serious part.
But that, I love that.
Okay,
I love it when people take license to like something that should be sad, and then they find it funny. I think that's actually really interesting and beautiful.
I guess it's like we kind of knew which bits would potentially get a laugh, but also some of the reactions to, like, for example, the reaction to the bit where I go, I don't see anyone else here, like in the show, like, was a full ad lib where I just run out of things to say, and the fact that people thought it was hilarious, I was like, well, that's interesting. And it's like having the audience there as like just this whole other presence to bounce off of, to like keep feeding you energy,
which means like when we're making and rehearsing, we don't have
that.
So
You've got like maybe one person, like an outside eye, who's having a little bit of a laugh here and there, but like that, like the sheer volume of people, and then also the volume of the laughter. It's like so important.
I mean, I have to, like, even the show that I'm doing this weekend, it's like a family. I'm doing like I dance with a circus company. So it's like a very family entertainment show, and it's like there's a lot of like silly. It's not pantomime-y, but close. It's like silly for kids acting, so it's not like acting, right? And it's like when they taught me the show, I was like, okay. And they're like, yeah, this part you like make, go around and like make the kids laugh. And I was like, okay, cool. And it was like after the first like 2 or 3 shows that I did, I was like, now I get it. Like the rehearsal wasn't finished until I'd done a few shows.
Yeah.
And it's like now when I do the show, I know exactly. And I've even like I'm taking my choreographic credit here, but like I've added bits to the show, like what my character does, where like now we're getting claps from the audience because I'm like, oh, this is a bit that we could hold. Like don't like I'm going to offer you these crisps. This is something that happens in the show. I'm going to offer you these crisps. Don't take one because, for example, it used to be like I would offer this person the crisps. They would take the crisp, and that's the end of the show, right? But now we've done. They don't take the crisp until the audience clap, and I'm like, should he take the crisps? And they're like, yeah, and they start clapping, and then he takes the crisp. And it's like because I'd done it a few times, and it's like you see certain members of, like you said, like certain members of the audience go, yeah, go on, and you're like, ooh, if I hold for longer, I can get the whole audience to do that. And I think it's like it is really important to get that. It's really hard, and I think this is maybe why in dance we have like sharings and stuff, where it's like you do need an audience in front of you to get a full understanding. You can watch a video or you can watch it back in rehearsal, but it's like until there's an audience there it's not complete, until they viewed it.
And there's something that's like a bit ironic or contradictory with like people making work specifically in the UK, only because that's the experience that I have. But I think a lot of the time you can have a show that's good or just fine, and if you have enough performances, like the things you find whilst you're doing it that like actually makes it like elevate, and you can have a really good show, but if it's not been tested in front of an audience and you have a couple of nights, it can kind of like be a bit flat. And I think it's something that so many creatives, like theater makers in the UK struggle with, is this model where, if you're lucky, you have 6 nights or something, 6 performances, maybe not even that. Some shows you work on for 3 weeks and you have 1 performance. Sometimes it has a future, but you never really have this opportunity like you do if a theater show goes, for example, to Fringe, where you're doing it every night for a month, where you find out what it is in relationship to the audience. And I think it's both sad because I think there's so much opportunity for shows to be better, and for artists that are finding their voice to really know what it is that they're doing with their audiences. And at the same time, it's like, I mean, it's just a weird challenge to know that you're doing a couple of shows.
Well, if you think about like stand-up comedy, again, it's like they don't release a 1-hour special until they've gone to clubs, worked out material, refined it, performed, like, and they spend a year, some of them, performing before they do the final show, and it's like, I think, say for example, I went to see the Ruggeds, not the one they just did,
the one before. I saw that, the
Between Us with the big set.
Love that show.
Right, me too. And I think one of the benefits of them is all of those things that they did in there, all the little bits, have been somewhat tested.
They've
been
explored.
Exactly, Battle of the Year or in Breaking Battles or whatever. So they're like, oh, when we do this sort of little thing or this thing or this thing, we know it works on an audience, and you can work out kind of material in that way before you put it together in a show. I think even why there's like open art surgery and this kind of scratch thing is good, because it's like, I think we need more of it. I think that's actually in the hip hop, especially in the hip hop theater. I don't know if you can maybe talk on the contemporary side, if you guys maybe do things a little bit differently to us, but I feel like there's not that many, especially in the UK, not that many scratch performance things. And I think the chance for people to just try shit on stage, I think that's what open art is amazing for, because it's like, and that's what I love about scratch stuff, where it's like, I've got this idea, I have no idea if it's going to work, but let me not only build it in a studio, but also try it out in front of a bunch of people, see what I think now that I watch it back and go, oh, that sucks. Or there's part of it that's good, a part of it that's bad, and I think, like you said, like being able to like work out this stuff in front of an audience and build it up to a show, it ends with a way better product than, I don't know, is it something that you do more in the contemporary, or is it more of a thing to, like, as a choreographer, to have like scratch nights or put on shows more?
I feel like there is the intention to kind of introduce feedback earlier in processes, also because I think that's how Arts Council funding is kind of, I think that's what they're expecting now, is like constant evaluation throughout processes, and they want you to have like phases where you try work. Like I work with a company should I just shout out Coalesce Dance Theatre, and they're working on a show where they've gone through like a period of R&D, and then they've just done a bunch of sharings, and they've introduced a lot of community input. They've talked to their target audience, and they've had workshops with them where they've interacted with them personally, and they can use all of that as like a basis for which the show is built. But that's like an ideal situation, because really what we're faced with more often is the 3 weeks and then you just kind of have to go do a show. And sometimes there's like 4 shows. I think that's more common with indoor performances, but I work with a number of outdoor companies, and wow, we perform loads over a summer. Like we can over one weekend do 4 shows.
That's what I'm doing this weekend.
Yeah, and it's like and then I really felt myself grow into the shows that I was working on that were all like outdoor pieces.
Yeah, I'm doing outdoor as well.
And there's also that thing of like when the audience is right there, they're not in darkness, they're literally spitting distance from you, and you can see every expression on their face. That does something as well for how you figure out your relationship with the audience and how you develop the way you grow into your role within a performance. So, well, what I'm really saying is I'm a huge fan of outdoor work. And I think that's honestly the way to go, because you're interacting with like you say, people who might not be like hip hop or contemporary or any form of dance.
People that might not even have left their house expecting to see a show.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the people
walked along their little buggy and they're like, something's happening
Let
here.
me stop and watch
Let
this.
me just stop and watch
and
this.
This also, besides the feedback like that, but that's the best way to know if you're doing well, because we've done shows where it's like 8 people watching and people go past and then they just keep walking and you're like, okay, they're not feeling it. If you can,
it's brutal.
If I'm on the way to the post office and you make me stop to watch a 30-minute show, you did well, you know? So it's like, it's the best test if that audience, it's like a YouTube video in a way. Like there's a whole thing on YouTube now with like creators where it's about the retention and how long it's not about getting people to click, it's how long they stay on your video, right? It's the same with these outdoor shows. It's like, if they don't like it, like I'm not getting up, and I've been bored in Sadler's many a time. I'm not getting up and leaving in the middle of a show. I might leave at the interval, but I'm not getting up in the middle, excuse me, to leave,
shuffle,
right?
Bum shuffle along the seats.
Exactly.
Absolutely not.
But in an outdoor show, they will. They will just get up and walk out while you're maintaining eye contact with them. See you later then. You know, bye mum. Like, but you know, it's like,
because these are people who have no investment in what you're doing. They might not even know what form of dance it is that you're doing. Because I've gotten asked on multiple occasions, performing contemporary dance in outdoor spaces is great because you just get all kinds of, is this ballet? Or like, are you one of them dancing with the stars? And I'm like, oh, well, this is interesting. So it's called contemporary, and I don't even know what it is. And it's like, it's brilliant.
What is contemporary? Don't pull that thread.
Don't pull on that thread because it's my entire career and it's just hinging on it. But yeah, it's great because these are people who in a way like couldn't care less. So if you can get them to stop and watch,
and that's
a real test.
And I think that's the beauty of like knowing, okay, like you can get feedback. Like Jonesy D came up after the show and said some really lovely things, and he's not pulled punches with me before. I've made stuff and he's like, I think you should do something else. And I'm like, oh.
Listen, sir, I don't like it.
I'm like, all right, okay. Well, I appreciate the honesty. But like having people, if you're doing an outdoor show and you see if they stop and stay, you can stop and stay, see the look in their eyes, like, you know, you're doing something right. It comes back to the whole thing where like, I don't think people should be defensive about critics, because honestly, I like have, you know, loads of friends to come to see a show and people who would say, I would always tell you the truth. But come on.
Yeah.
They're not going to say, they're not going to say the things where like, but this thing kind of sucked. And like, why would they tell that to me?
Yeah.
Even my partner who ended up in the show, that's a whole another story. And so, there's something like that, even though I got like some, you know, a couple of tough reviews, I got a couple of positive reviews, that is really useful.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I have to remind myself that although I've just said critics are important, that there was another reason why I made the show, and that's for people, for visibility, for people who struggled with things. And after our post-show, well, during our post-show talk, there were people who like were movement impaired, people who lived with pain, and they really, really connected with seeing like Jamal on stage, like literally like in a leg brace. And I know like Saskia, do you know Saskia? She's they are a very, very good friend of mine. And they're going through their own chronic illness, and we've had a lot of conversations about what that means, and also just like all the silliness and humor that's in it, even though some of the struggles are dark and hard. And I have to remind myself that those people came to see the show and it means something. And trying to hold those two things together, because if you're too just making it for certain people, then you know, why are you selling tickets to everyone? But yeah, I think it still matters.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a real balance as any maker. Like, you want to consider the audience. You also want to make stuff that is true to you and not sell out completely your ideas for the audience. And then it's like, there's also, you want the critics, because like you said, good critical reviews can help you with future funding and whatever. But also, fuck them, because there's an audience that liked it. So it's like there's a balance to be struck between all of these things.
You don't want to make a show where you're leaning so hard on you know, being representative that actually artistic merit without, like, you can have a very ethical and a very beautiful show, but which isn't actually particularly entertaining as well, which is like,
that drives me up the fucking wall, because
sorry, I was gonna say, I think that's why, like, the storytelling was essentially the most important element, because at the end of the day, that's the thing that resonates with everyone. I mean, we could have had more movement, and movement is also an incredibly universal experience, but really what it is that people see and what it is that stays with them, regardless of how much dance they've done, whether they used to, they don't do it anymore, whatever, they don't even know what hip hop is. Like, we all know stories.
And it's the most, like, this is why I get so annoyed at, like, theatre shows that do, especially hip-hop theatre shows that do narrative. It's not because I don't like narrative, it's actually the opposite. It's like, I hold it in such high regard that I'm like, you can do this so well and you can communicate so many beautiful things through this, so make an effort. Because it's like, what I find a lot of people do is, like, the narrative is the last thing, or the thing that gets the least. It's like, oh, that's a beautifully choreographed, super well rehearsed routine you've got, but the whole narrative is trash. And it's like, I'd rather it be a freestyle, but in the middle, like even with you guys, like your solos, it's like in the midst of a good narrative. And that's like what's more important, I think, and more effective at, like, communicating things, because it's like across everything, music, movies, religion, any topic, it's like the story is the most important thing. If we talk about marketing of, like, a box of cereal, it's what is the story we're selling you. It's not what is the cereal. It's Coke isn't about Coke, it's the story. Nike is about the story. You're an athlete, it sells this. Everything is story, and religious texts are all through story. So it's like, it's the most universally understood thing. I was watching something with a not archaeologist, but a podcast with he's talking about, like, you know, the guy that does ancient civilization stuff. Have you seen it? Graham Hancock, his name is. I can't
remember what it's called. Something histories.
I can't remember. It's a really interesting. It's like borderline conspiracy theories, but really interesting stuff. Probably where he's talking about, like, there being ancient civilizations, like, beyond even, like, way before the ancient Egyptians, that were like 12,500, and they were super advanced and blah blah. Anyway, one of the points he was making was that, like, in, let's say, in 5,000 years from now, we don't know that people are going to understand English or even be able to translate English, right? If we write all these things out, and, like, Psy did a show, it's like, that might mean nothing in 5,000 years, or they might have no idea that he even existed. But what will pass down and will transcend language and barriers and culture is story. So the story of, let's say, a great flood in history, right? There was Noah's Ark, there's this, that. It doesn't matter what language it was written in, that story of the great flood will be translated through cultures in whatever way it needs to be to pass through, and it's like, it will stay longer. And I think on a way smaller version, it's like, if you don't understand dance, if you don't find it funny, if you don't get what the conditions are that you guys are supposed to, the story will communicate those things. Do you know what I mean? It's like, this whole story is like, I might not find it funny, I might not care about the dance, but I'm in this story. This character's doing that, this is happening, cool, I'm somewhat connected. And I think this is what we lose sometimes with hip hop, where it's like, it's just a bunch of cool moves.
Yeah, but isn't that the perspective of someone who watches hip hop dance all the time, who watches dance all the time? Because I think again, like I took my partner to see Breaking Convention, and as I think happens every year, Boy Blue ends the show, and I've seen Breaking Convention maybe like 10 times. Huge fan, obviously, and Boy Blue are legitimately incredible. But I have seen their work now, essentially 10 years, and I watch it through those eyes, which is like, oh, it's amazing, and also great, like I'm also like, I can see the skill. It's like watching a chef make a beautiful meal. It's cool, but it's very easy for me to disengage
because you're used to it.
Yeah. And then I asked Amy what she thought about the different acts, and she's like, oh, the last act was incredible, I could have watched them forever. And I was like, oh yeah,
you haven't seen this for 10 years.
That's also like what happens if you haven't seen it. Just like seeing people being incredibly skilled and incredibly artful is also really legitimately exciting. And sometimes I forget that.
Do you know my pushback to that, or my devil's advocate, right?
Yeah.
Is sport. Because you could watch, let's say like boxing, right? I don't really care about boxing or UFC or anything like that. I don't really like fight sport in general. It's not something that I connect with. I find it a bit like, I don't like people beating shit out of each other. I don't, it's like, oh, the guy's bleeding. Like, poor him, not let's cheer. I get it. I don't really connect with it at all. But what does bring me in time after time, and I keep finding myself, I'll just switch it on to just see, is the story. It's like, oh, Mayweather versus McGregor. Like, why do I give a shit? Two people beating each other up again. And it's like, because this guy's not supposed to be a boxer. This guy's the greatest of all time. And but they're not in the same.
And it's all their conversations outside.
And it's why is this happening? Even with, basketball or football or whatever, it's like, as soon as and this is again, I think something the battle scene misses, but that's another conversation for another day, but is like, the story of like, why is this match important when it's just a Premier League match? I could turn it on. I'm like, okay, cool, football. When it's the World Cup final, it's different. Why is it different? The story, the stakes, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, they've beaten the last year's champions to get to this final, and now they could lose to the people that beat them last year. That is what makes the skill. It's not that it's not impressive, but it just hits home. Yeah. And it's a bit deeper of a thing. Do you know what I mean?
And that's my taste, but I'm also I also think making a show where every single person in the room is blown away. Yeah. And I don't, true. I question, like, is that a good, like, barometer of a good, like, whatever, a guiding light,
like North Star kind of thing.
Right. North Star to find the show that you want to make? Maybe it isn't, but it is something I would like to do.
And I mean, to
I have to go to the bathroom.
No, go. It's all good. It's all good. We're relaxed here. To play devil's advocate to what I was just saying, though, have you seen? There's a show by Crystal Pike called The Statement.
Oh, I mean, no, but I should, because I love Crystal Pike. That's a very basic opinion to have. I'm very aware
Michael Jackson made good music.
Like, oh yeah, like I love rainbows and sunshine.
Beyonce can sing.
Yeah, Beyonce is the queen of pop. Ooh, actually, maybe that is a controversial opinion.
True.
But yeah, like I do genuinely love Crystal Pike.
But she did this. I saw this. It's the first time I ever see. I've only seen 3 pieces of her work now, but in real life. And the first one I ever saw was called The Statement, and it's a 30-minute piece, right? I think, or 20-minute even. And there's not, as far as I can tell, there's not really any deep layers to it. Yes, there's somewhat of a story, but like what Sai was saying, like, it's just impressive. It just blew me away because of like the dance and the way. The technical building blocks than the overall story. So in a way, it's like, that's like one of my favorite pieces I've ever seen.
Right.
And that was just because it blew me away technically. You know what I mean? Like, and there's other things like where the story is something that grabs. But I think it is a valid thing. I was just saying, I think it is a valid thing to want to blow people away. Because like I was just saying, one of the pieces that is one of my favorite pieces ever wasn't because of the story. The story was very basic in a way almost. And it was like, just technically blew me away.
I overheard Crystal, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Crystal Pite?
The Statement. Pite.
Yeah. And there's something very Disney about it, which I really love as well.
Which one?
The Statement.
Disney?
As in, like, because they're physicalizing the movements, the voices in such an emphasized way.
Yeah.
Oh, I know which one this is.
With the table.
Yeah, I've seen videos. Not the full thing. Videos.
So good.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
But just even that, even just the little like nuances of like where the person goes and they like physicalize that, or like there's just so many things where it's like, I mean, I don't know if you'd say different, but like the story isn't that deep. It's just like it's like a segment of a thing that doesn't have a beginning or end. It's just
And then again, that's almost what's beautiful about it, is you get this little snippet of some difficult conversation that's happening in some company. I definitely, on some level, was inspired by it. It's like, I mean, not anything specific, but I definitely saw the statement and was like, oh, it's incredible. And I love how they've used word and physicality and had some very simple story and then just made it a thing.
Did you see Revisor? The Revisor.
No, I saw another one of her work, which was also incredible. Like
not the recent one. The immigrants.
Yeah, or refugees. This shows how much I remember things and retain information.
No, I don't know. I've only, like I was saying, I've only seen maybe 3 of her pieces. This one was about not the recent one with the lion skeleton thing. No, that's about environmentalism and stuff. No. Anyway, Revisor is really good. But yeah, again, it's like, I think it is a valid thing to like just want to blow people away as well.
Well, interesting. Just a thought about blowing people away. Is that so? There's 2 ways to look at it, right? There's the one which is, if you aren't a person who's accustomed to seeing people do impressive things with their body, the threshold for what is impressive is quite different. Because I've definitely pulled out the splits at parties before, and people are like, holy shit, the splits, and I'm like, yeah,
contemporary dance is cool.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So it's like the threshold can vary, obviously, depending on what you're used to seeing and also what maybe you yourself can do with your body. But also, I think when you are someone who's versed in movement, when you observe movement, we do that thing like the monkey see, monkey do kind of like reflex that we have, where we kind of are embodying movement as we watch it. I don't know if that's just me. I feel like it's a pretty universal experience.
There's something scientific about that. It's called muscle mirroring or something. There's something that happens where you
watch someone moving and you essentially are in your body also kind of experiencing what it's like to do that movement. So in some ways, I wonder if actually simpler movement but executed exceedingly well wows people who are versed in movement more than people who aren't, because we understand how difficult it is to achieve that because we've tried and we've potentially failed.
Oh yeah, I definitely resonate with that. Like I used to, as a young breaker, cuss out contemporary dances all the time, and like, what you guys do is easy. And then I was doing like theater shows where people would be like, just walk over here and turn around, and like, I don't know what it is, but like I just couldn't do it nicely. It just looked like garbage, just like walking and turning, like the basic things of just like, and then lean and pick up this thing. And I'm like, oh, you're actually really good at that stuff.
But I think it's with everything artistic, right? That the more mature you get within your artistic discipline, the more that the subtlety, the stillness, the simplicity becomes the highly regarded thing, or the more difficult thing. Because even if you look at, in battles, this is something I see all the time. But the more you can just look in a room, and the beginners are the ones that dance so fast on just throw everything they've got within 30 seconds. And you see the more experienced people that maybe do 1 or 2 or 3 things max. If you look at breakers, it's like you probably see beginners that are like, they do every step, all the freezes, all the stuff. And then it's like you watch these like European games or these like high level breakers, and it's like they're doing tops, bit of footwork, maybe 1 or 2 things. It's not a lot of stuff, but it's done so well. And also,
like Zupreme is a great example.
Oh my God,
like he can just do basic footwork, and obviously he'll normally throw in 1 blow up, but like it's so lush. It's like I can't even put my finger on it. It's like he literally embodies the idea of like freestyle, hitting the music, and then when he does hit something, it's incredible. And I think
It's like the whole thing of like, it's not what you do, it's how you do it.
Yeah, but it's very hard to do. It's very hard to do because it's vulnerable. It's saying like, you do these moves. If they don't like your moves, it's like, I'll learn more moves. If you're dancing honestly and they're like, I don't like it, it feels personal.
And I wonder how much of it is like you're hiding. This is the way I describe it when I teach, but it's like you're hiding behind more stuff, right? So if you think of someone with anxiety, right, it's like, or who's an anxious talker or whatever, and they're in a job interview, they will come across as like not confident because they'll just keep speaking. And well, I like this, but also I kind of like this. And it's like, because you say one thing and you're worried about how it's going to be received, you just keep talking. And then the next thing you're worried about how that's going to, so you like say, well, if I just keep talking, they'll forget about the thing from before. And like a really confident person, if you think of like a debate over dinner or something and everyone's shouting and screaming, the confident person will go, well, what about this? And just, that's it. Or like, no, because of this. And then you go, it's really interesting. Like we all know that person that's like, they don't say a lot, but when they speak up, you're like, damn, you're smart. You know what I mean? And then the other person that doesn't stop talking and, but like doesn't always say things of substance. You know what I mean? And I think it's the same with art where it's like you said, it's like, they're probably, you at the beginning being like, oh, you guys are just standing over there doing nothing or walking around. They're probably looking at you like, okay, yeah, you can throw a million moves in it, but what can you not do? Or how can you like stand still on stage? And like, for me, this is where I'm at in my career, where I find that so, like, I love that stuff where it's like, you're just standing on stage and all you did was look over there, but I can't look away. Like you've got me. Like even in movies, like just a simple pan in, I'm like, oh shit, where are we, rather than Fast and the Furious, where it's like, okay, you're just doing everything. Okay, yeah, throw a car in space, why not? Whereas like there's like what's his name, who did The Irishman, Martin Scorsese, like a Martin Scorsese movie where it's like just like a little look or a one simple sentence and you're like, ooh shit, like, and I think it's an artistic thing, and I think that transcends all art, where it's like the more mature you are, the more you can play with the simplicity and stillness. This is something I think contemporary dancers do amazingly. Like I always watch contemporary for that type of stuff where it's like, it's just it's very old. A lot of the dance styles used within contemporary, as well as whatever you define contemporary as, is old as hell, right? Like especially compared to hip hop, it's like the whole culture has been around 50 years, let alone like some of the dances, so it's like we still haven't quite got, especially in theatre, which is even younger than the battle format. I think it's taken a while for that to settle in, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny. Just I honestly thought you were gonna criticize the show more. I was expecting.
I thought I was going to criticize the show more.
More of a debate.
I was actually disappointed. I was like, I love because I find with battles it's like really short. Tends to be short format, obviously the whole events, there's so much to criticize. It's almost like it's too easy. But like with the hip hop theater or theater in general, I love analyzing it and picking it apart, because it's like, that's what I love about doing this, is like I love to sit and just look at all the details and be like, that could have been done and I don't like the way that was done. And I was like, you gave me license. You were like, give me your unfiltered thought. And I was like, here we go. Because usually it's like, I give my unfiltered thoughts and people don't, they're not happy about it and they complain
that's just
send me inboxes.
Don't make art then.
Well,
don't he said it. You can do it in your room if you don't want people to have opinions about it, because whether you hear them or not, they're having them. You might as well.
Oh, that's a bar.
You might as well know what it is, so you can either be strong in your own convictions and be like, I disagree, or be like, maybe they have a point.
Yeah. But this is why I was disappointed, is because you gave me full license and I was there, I was ready. I was like, all right, I'm going to tell him everything I don't like about the show. And I was like, I'm fucking enjoying it. I was like, this is really good. Like there's stuff that I would say like, or more me, not as a critic, but as a choreographer, if you said, what would you change or whatever, there's stuff that I would maybe be like, oh, maybe I'd do this or that. Also, we have to discuss the Jamal thing, because I gave a lot of like, I don't know how this could have looked because of Jamal. So we can talk about that in a second. But yeah, man, I thought there was so much, and maybe I lowered my expectation because I went in there looking to criticize. I don't know how it played in, but I just thought it was really good. And I thought the four of you like really killed it because that would have been my first criticism is like the acting and the delivery and stuff like that, especially with comedy. But I was like, damn it, they are nailing it. But yeah, it was good. But do you want to explain maybe about the Jamal thing? If we're allowed to.
Yeah.
How much you're allowed to say.
I mean, I think it's pretty open considering Jamal injured himself on stage. When he originally in his previous show. So he was doing a show as part of the Breaking Convention tour. His show, which is called 1%, it's an amazing show. It's performed by him and Marius.
I think I've seen it.
Yeah.
Was that at Birmingham International Dance Festival, or did they do it at?
They've done it
Brick Mission?
a bunch of times.
I'm sure I've seen it somewhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, sorry.
So it's really good. And unfortunately, he tore a ligament in the middle of the show and basically had to do the rest of the show limping and kind of crawling and just getting through it. I think adrenaline helped a lot. But, basically he did the show and people weren't sure if he was injured or not. And then when he came on to bow, he was like limping on and had to go to A&E for 7 hours. And then he called me later and was like, this has happened. I got a message first and I couldn't get through to him because I was like, I don't know how bad it is, whatever. And I do remember lying on the floor face down for 2 hours being like, oh no, what do we do? The role is basically written for him.
How close to this show was that?
That happened basically on a Wednesday.
Of the show?
No.
Oh.
So Wednesday the week before. So we had...
Well, still, Jesus.
Yeah, we had 2 days where we were going back and forth. Do we recast? Do we...
Right.
Do we just cut him and try and do the show with 3 people, which is impossible if you've seen the show. We were talking about pulling the show and all the ramifications of how much it costs us, and that's fine. Obviously, we pay out everyone for the thing, but it's a really big thing for the venue as well to do that and refund all these tickets and stuff. So in the end, we were like, you know what? If Jamal's okay with it, and we so much of the conversation was about his health and safety.
Sure.
We actually got a wheelchair for him for the rehearsals.
Mad.
And a knee brace because his knee can't do that. He was talking about how it's how did you describe it? That makes you nauseous. It's loose or something. It's slip. It's like a bit of spaghetti or something.
Oof.
There's no hold there. And obviously we had to make sure that he would get Ubers from where he was staying, and actually ended up staying at my place because there's an elevator. He was going to stay somewhere else that had a staircase. All these things you don't think about, ways getting into the building. And all of that kind of being discussed. By the time I got to Friday, he was like, okay, we can go ahead.
So you had a week.
So I had 3 days basically with everyone. And I also, I got him on board the project because I know that when he dances, he's just incredible. Yeah. He's one of those beautiful breakers that can kind of stand between more traditional breaking and this very expressive, very narrative, beautiful, expressive dancing. So can't do that. And ironically, as I mentioned, when he started on the project, he was like, I don't know if you should find someone else. I don't know about the acting stuff.
It's now that's all you're doing.
And that's all he was doing.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is that he's actually really great on stage as a performer, and he says some of the funniest stuff that he just riffs on himself. But yeah, so everything we did was he's basically either in the chair or he's on a crutch, and
it fits the theme.
Yeah,
at least.
Yeah, I mean, in a show that's all about giving space for people in going through stuff, it makes sense. And
I mean, the fact that you kept him on stage was actually kind of part of the message.
Yeah.
We're not going to kick you out just because you hurt yourself.
And the question is, if the show has future life, is the show better because he's
how can we injure him every time?
How can we injure him every time?
Show coming up, kick him down the stairs.
Part of his contract.
Jamal, if you're listening,
you have to
run.
tear your ligaments before each show. So I don't know. It's questions to be asked. I know.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's even if obviously don't injure him every show, but even that is maybe you can there might be bits that stay in it. It's like, oh, maybe in that bit he was going to stand up and maybe he doesn't, or maybe it's part of his character, you know, like maybe there's something that can be learned from it, which is cool.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure. And it's also sad because like one of the funniest things of the version that we had in us is the fact that Lisa's...
I'm basically half Jamal's height.
Oh, really? And is there stuff?
And they had
playing on
duets and
Yeah.
stuff where like Lisa's climbing on Jamal to get the phone.
Like a tree.
Oh, like
Yeah.
that when you're trying to get the phone from him, that one.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
There's a whole bit where he sits on a fridge and I have to deliver lines whilst like hoiking myself onto the fridge at the same time. And it's like,
Nice.
yeah, it's we have all these bits that existed in the version of the show and he didn't have a torn ligament. But yeah, I don't know. Personally, I feel like the version of the show that we made for the place, the one that happened because of what happened, should like stay the way it was. Because like you say, like the circumstances that happened, which was we had an injured dancer, but we decided to go ahead with the show and to make accommodations so that everyone can be safe and also be on stage. Like that's part of the context that made those performances special and
Yeah.
also resonate with the theme of saving face.
Yeah, and it's just interesting reflecting because I wouldn't have done anything different, and I think it was important for me and meaningful for me to see that happen and to just hold space for everyone. And I think for the audience that came through, like I think it was meaningful for quite a lot of people there. At the same time, I know that one of the bits of feedback from various people, like industry people, was like, oh, we would have liked to see more dance. And it was like, yeah, there was
issues.
There was more dance.
There was, and how do I balance that as, because, you know, as a director, you're not just directing, you're also co-producing. And like, I think it was the right decision, but like our PR person said like, oh, if the critics had seen the version in Leicester, they wouldn't, it's more likely they would have said something slightly different and then would looked at it in a slightly different light in basically more positively. And I was like, okay.
I mean, it's interesting because like I saw Joe before the show, and he was like, "Oh, did you hear about the thing?" And I was like, "What thing?" And he was like, "Oh, I don't know if I should tell you or not." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Oh, it might affect how you watch it." And I was like, "Oh, just tell me." So he told me, and I was like, "Okay, cool, interesting." I'm glad I knew because maybe there's bits that I might have criticized that I didn't, but in the same way, maybe it's not I think I'm looking at the show outside of that one performance. So all the bits where I knew he was injured, but then there's like a bit where I'm pretty sure this is where he would have been doing something and they've just changed it. I can see that. So maybe I'm giving you a bit too much credit or not too much credit, but like I'm seeing what I think Leicester would have looked like.
Yeah.
Whereas the other critics are maybe going, there wasn't enough dance, but I'm only saying there's enough dance because I know where the dance was supposed to go, maybe. I don't know.
And also, even if he was doing those dance in those moments, I think it doesn't necessarily actually make the show inherently better. There's something about the feeling of like, I don't know, partially defensiveness of being like, oh, you know, it wasn't the show we originally imagined, and maybe, you know, it would have been better if that happened. But I think probably if I ask myself honestly, it probably didn't make a difference.
Well, also it's like, it's what you said about like, you know, testing stuff out with an audience and stuff. It's like you want to maybe give both elements more of a chance. And also, to be fair to you, like even if this version of the show is valid and is something that you want to retain, you only had 3 days to work it out. If he was injured but you had like 2 months to work out how to fit a show around an injured person, you're going to feel a lot better about it, you know, than something that you pull together. Anything you pull together in 3 days, you know, you're never going to feel 100% about it.
Yeah, and that's true. And also, audiences don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care how long you've had to make it.
Which is a good reminder, I think, for makers, because it's like, I always say this to people, it's like, you can't like especially in battles and stuff, but even on stage, it's like you can't stop and explain context. There's no annotation to be like, oh, but he's injured, or oh, but actually this part we just did last night. So it's like you just have to do it. The audience see what they see. So get your excuses out the way, and
those are the limitations
deliver something.
which you're working within, and that's true of any show, even a show that has 1 million weeks and all the money. They have limitations, and nobody cares about excuses.
I mean, how many times do we watch a movie? Oh, I mean, I'm into like comic book. Do you watch Marvel and all that?
Some. I actually got to a point where all the Marvel films start feeling the same to me.
Don't get me started. They are disappointing me massively. But how many times, especially in the COVID, since the Disney Plus show started and that, there's so many times where I've been like, this show sucks. And then you hear, oh, there's been reshoots, or oh, they had to change the order, or oh, they couldn't film because of COVID. I get it. My opinion still doesn't change. It still sucks.
Right.
You've still delivered me a shit show. Like, it doesn't matter whether and I'm sure if I was in the production, I do have all the empathy for these people that are trying to make these huge £1 million movies, in COVID or whatever. I understand how difficult that must be. As an audience member, the show sucked.
Just make different decisions. If you went back to the start of the process, and then you were a director, what would you have done? Would you have done stuff differently? Obviously, like I'm now 36. I've been making work for a while, and I think that also sometimes gives me narrow vision. And I'm wondering, for someone who's like, this is the first kind of theater show that you've been in. Am I right?
Yep.
How you felt about the process, and actually what you might have wanted to have done differently?
I don't know. I mean, as you say, I don't have a lot of context for how theatre shows are typically done or what is expected in their processes. But I guess one aspect I could think of was that, but this would have changed a lot about the show in the end, I think, if we had done this. But one aspect I could think of was that none of us, because we are all not trained in voice work or in acting, that was for a lot of us, I think, like a bit of like a sore spot. It was this thing of like, oh, I'm really putting myself out there here. Like I genuinely don't know what I'm doing. So I think at one point Yuki used the word shooting in the dark, and I was like, that is how it feels, isn't it? I'm doing a little bit of like, yeah, and just seeing what lands. And like, I guess in my mind I was like, perhaps we could have done we could have taken some time to explore a bit of just like basic techniques, or like how I just like very, I want to say like beginner steps to approaching these things. I don't even know what they could have been. I guess like projection exercises is kind of what we did. But well, there's a thing of like, yes, so the audience doesn't care, but genuinely in that 3 weeks, we did not have time to do this. We wouldn't have had time to do this.
It's blowing me away that you didn't have any, like you were so good, if I haven't said that already. Like the fact that you're like, oh, we didn't even do basic stuff. I'm like sitting here like, what the fuck? Like you should genuinely, like, I mean, I don't know anything about acting and stuff, but I think you should genuinely look into like being an actor or something. Like you did, especially if like you're saying you had no like training in it. Like you nailed that show for me. I mean, again, I'm not an expert in acting.
Yeah.
I thought you were so good.
I think
thank you.
That's fair. And I think that was probably unfair of me in many ways. I think I just had absolute faith in you guys. Like I knew obviously you were coming in, and Yuki actually really spoke for you after the auditions, because weirdly, don't hate me, because I had someone else who was gonna do the role,
right,
and then they couldn't do it, and you were considerably shorter than them, and I was like, is these are too short to play this character? and Yuki's like, this is amazing, she can groove.
Like pros and cons list. It's just like pros is all this, and yeah, short.
Question mark.
Height is a con.
Are people gonna be like, is this like person old enough to be in the office? Yeah. Obviously this is stuff that I would only tell confidants and not share on a podcast, because it puts me in
you would never do that.
Terrible light.
Luckily it's just the three of us in here.
But luckily Yuki was like, no, you're just the best from that bunch, or the most suited to the role, because there were some lovely and amazing dancers in the audition.
I'm
forgot what I was talking about. But Yuki and Jamal I'd seen in shows, and they've done stuff, particularly Yuki, who's used her voice in shows, and I'm like,
She seems super confident.
yeah, but she was not.
Oh, really?
This is what I mean. It was a really interesting journey for her, and I think it's okay for me to share because she shared it in a post-show talk, and I hope it's okay, Yuki. But English is not her first language, and I think generally there is some insecurity about that, some completely understandable insecurity, and she talked to me about it, and I was like, it's actually important for me and meaningful for me that this character doesn't have English as their first language. It's actually partially based on people I know who are in positions of leadership where English is not their first language, and they have to negotiate, sometimes both being a woman in a position of leadership, but also their mode of communication is something that they feel insecure about. That's a real story, and that's something that I think a lot of people will resonate with. And
yeah, I think that's a great character trait for that character is they're not almost leaning into that. That's actually something that I would not criticize, but again, I said if I had choreographic notes, something I would have said after the show was
played more with
to make it more of a thing, because it's let's say with Jamal's thing with the knee brace, it's very obvious, but I could almost let myself believe that was done on purpose, even though I knew.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, the whole thing is he's a guy, who's injured or disabled, or it could be anything like that, right? And it's with that, it's it's not that. I understood everything she said perfectly. She delivered the lines and spoke English brilliantly. But it's you can also hear when someone is maybe not their first language, and that could have
really
been
great.
An interesting. Because what you're saying is great, and it fits with the whole theme. Is this: she's a woman, and she's a second language, and she's in a position of power, trying to gain the respect of English speakers. So if you lean into that, and even some moments where she says the wrong word, and even some humorous moments,
I think that could be really funny. Just where you say phrases, transliterated phrases.
Oh my god, my partner's her French is her first language. She's from Montreal, and some of the times when I die the most is when she either says an English phrase completely wrong because she doesn't know what. She said, "You caught me right-handed," instead of red-handed, and I was like, what did you say? And she's like, what?
And that is funny.
I'm dying. And I think it's great.
And I can totally imagine a situation where Leslie, the manager, says a phrase like that, and everyone has to pretend they didn't hear it because it's we're just, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and which also has the flip side, which is the serious side as well, and you can show the effects of that, like you did with your condition in the show, where it's there's some moments where you really play it for laughs, and then there's some moments where it starts to turn, and you're like, okay, that's actually really tough. And I think you could do the same with this. There's the humorous side of it, and then there's also it's again, it's the same for my partner. It's her English is pretty flawless, to be honest, but it's I understand how the little French I speak, it's I understand how frustrating it is to not be able to communicate in a language, especially when everyone around you and is fluent.
Yeah,
I think that's a really important thing, and it's actually a good thing that she doesn't, for the story.
And but Yuki did really. That was definitely a big journey for her in terms of being comfortable acting. And a part of it was the opportunity to try it, but definitely it's scary.
Yeah.
And so I really...
Acting in your second language is wild.
So I did ask...
I can't even act in my first language.
I asked a lot of you guys. So yeah, I'm really, really, really impressed with how they handled it.
Yeah. There's so much I enjoyed about the show. I love the set. I thought you did really good things with the set. I thought you did, as soon as I walked
Christine
in...
Tinghuan Urquhart.
Shout out Christine.
To the designer.
I thought you did a fantastic job of transforming the space without a crazy extensive set. There was a lot of stuff, but it wasn't it was a whole props. Installation. It was just a lot of props.
Do you know, do you want to talk about props? The document Yuki made?
So amongst Yuki's many skills, she wields this iPad which contains, I think at one point we had 37 drawings of scene changes, and it's in excruciating detail, but it's because it's necessary. We need to know which table winds up where, so that in a very specific point in time where we need a hook, which is on some tables but not on all the tables, and needs to catch Jackie's jacket and it needs to be in this position. We had to do some real like tracking back through the scenes to make sure that the right objects are where they need to be at the right times.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And like the screens have like corners on them, and then we also had to track which screens were where so that they were facing the right direction, and it was quite a mindfuck. We also had to do an object permanence run where we just have to like go through the show, and because there's the big props like chairs and tables and screens, and then we have the teeny tiny ones like, are your eye drops on you? Or like, I don't know, like, where is Alex? Because she's sitting on someone else's desk and she's not their girlfriend.
If you put the picture of Alex down on the wrong table, it'll get wheeled around so it's somewhere else when you need it. So
that game with the 3 cups on the ball.
Yeah. So every
which
single
one is
prop,
it in?
you have to know exactly where it is, where to put it down, where to find it.
But I mean, if it helps, I think it was worth it because like it was a lot of props, but it's not like you came in and like, you know, I don't know, did a whole full installation. It was just like a lot of props on stage, but it really transformed the space, the costumes as well. But like, yeah, I really felt like, oh, this is an office thing. And it really, like, there's a lot of attention to detail, I thought, which was really well done on that. Yeah, there's so much stuff I loved about the show, to be honest. But yeah, I think you did a really fantastic job.
Thank you.
Ooh. I'm so disappointed I can't criticize it more. Do something else. I'll try and criticize that.
Plenty of that for myself.
Yeah, but you should really be proud of that, man. I think it's like, even if it develops, and because I think there's you know, you can be happy and unsatisfied at the same time. You know what I mean? It's like because something can be better doesn't mean, and I'm not saying you are, but just in case you are, just because something can be better doesn't mean you should beat yourself up about where it is now. Like, it's okay that you have something fantastic and it can be mega fantastic. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, I think definitely, like, you know, keep asking yourself these, you know, again, who the fuck am I to give you advice? But like, keep asking yourself all these million questions that you're probably asking yourself, listening to all the feedback and whatever. But I think you should definitely still be like, we fucking smoked that.
Thanks, man. I'll definitely, that'll definitely make me feel a bit more positive. I think the first review I read was like pretty brutal. And I was on the back foot because the first thing they said was like, it's advertised as a 60-minute show and it was 80 minutes. And I was like, ugh, I mean, that's
where did you have to be?
You
didn't have anything else to do.
I've definitely been in shows where it went on ages and I'm like, I don't want to be here anymore. It's very hard to like a show. But it had like legitimate criticism, and I was just like dark clouds for 2 days waiting for other reviews to come out, refreshing the internet every 5 seconds to be like, please, someone else have an opinion.
But you know what? So this is one thing on the critic discussion of art side, because especially in the last 3 years, I've really been like researching way more into this sort of stuff. And one thing I really don't like is that, and I'm not trying to take away from anyone who says anything negative, because I think it is important to listen. I'm the same as you. I think it's important to listen to the critics. However, it's way easier to sound smart when you're picking something apart, right? Like, I think what I think makes me good is that if I like something, I can tell you all the in-depth reasons why I like it. And I think I see a lot of people, even just in common conversations, where when they want to criticize something, they have so many things to point out. Because it's easy to say when something isn't how it should be. It's easy to say the show was 20 minutes longer than it should have been because it said on the paper. It's not so easy to say why you like something or why the positive elements and analyze what made something good, I think. And I think sometimes critics lean on that side, and that's why it's like, to bring out like a brutal review of a show, it makes more impact because people are like, oh, let me read why it only got 1 star. When it's like 4 stars or 3 stars, it's like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, the show was really good, blah, blah. And it's like, this is what I hate about a lot of the reviews that like hip hop shows get. Cause it's like, it's just a whole nothing sandwich for me. Like, what they say, it's just like, you know, Boy Blue's performance at Breaking Convention was high flying spectacle with explosive moves and crowd pleasing. I'm like, you're not saying anything. Like, what made it good? Oh, it was family friendly fun. Okay, that's not anything. You're just saying words. Like, I think that the analysis of positive stuff is lacking. So I think even when someone like gives you a brutal review, there's a little part of me that's like, are you just doing that because to have something to say? You know what I mean?
I'm sure that's true. I do. Basically, I think it hurts more when there's stuff in there and I'm like, well, yeah, you got a point.
Yeah. When you're like, oh, damn, I agree with that.
So I don't know. Did you read the Reviews Hub review? It was
Yeah, I
basically
did.
the first one out.
Yeah.
So what else did it say? The too long.
It was too long. It was overwritten.
What does that mean, overwritten?
I don't know. It's part of the too long parts. I can see
Like too much in it?
Well, I also wrote in a very kind of clean style. Like there's a lot of like, writing in theater, which is more subtle and about like characters developing much more slowly. And I can see that, but I wanted to write something which was almost sitcom-y. Is more accessible. That was a very intentional choice rather than being like more, I don't know. Yeah, I can't describe it, but like subtle and whatever. More like higher.
Boring.
Well, there's a place for it, but it's intentionally supposed to be fairly simple, and where artistry comes out is more in the dance and the delivery and the comedy. There was overridden, needed more dance, something along the lines of like it didn't know whether it was theater or dance, and like
But this is I'm so biased though, because I'm like, if this was fucking Crystal Pie or this was some big thing that already had a name, like what's his name? He does like sculpturesque stuff.
this in this is
Damien Jelle.
Damien
Jale.
Jale.
Yeah, you know him?
Yeah.
I bet they'd review his show and be like, oh, the interdisciplinary use of the different mediums really.
Well, maybe.
It's like-
and I've definitely seen Damien Jale stuff and it's like, oh God, I have such mixed feelings, because obviously like it is very beautiful, but also once you have enough resources that you can build a huge thing and get the best dancers doing it, it's just like, well, there's nothing to criticize there anymore, because all you
just throw money at it.
This is a different.
No, but that's what I mean. It's like when it's someone that has a big name, anything. This is what annoys me about art and critics is like when they say it didn't know this. It's like it's only because, like, it's almost like you're punching down because you can say that about them. When it's about them, it's like, oh, well, I couldn't possibly say that about Crystal Pie. She mixed mediums, but she's a genius. So even if I didn't like it, she must know what she's doing.
Isn't this?
You know what I mean?
Exactly. I don't know if you. I'm assuming. Have you ever battled?
No.
And do you want to right now?
Well.
Let's go. But this is a thing I hear a lot, where I'll chat with dancers afterwards and be like, the judges, like, they're so biased, they didn't get what I was doing. And it's like, that might be true, but it's not their job to see how great you are. It's your job to prove how good you are. And that is not just happening in one battle, it's happening over years. So yeah, someone like a famous breaker, for example, like Menno or India, like they've earned it by losing for so long.
This is a good point.
And having
Right.
to prove that they're good and judges voting against them, but coming back again and again, so that eventually they're like, I actually see what they're doing now. And I think, again, like whatever critics say, it's not on them really to see what I'm doing. It's my job to prove it.
It's annoying because not only is that a really good point, that's something that I would say to someone else. So I'm with you. That's really like, that's how I think about
But
stuff.
I'm curious, and I'm putting you on the spot. After reading that review, and there was another review, I can't remember, that was definitely not good. How do you feel about the show now? Does it change the way you feel about the process? Also, if in like a couple of years' time or 1 year time we would redevelop it, would you consider potentially coming back, or would you feel like
Formal invitation.
this is just hypothetically, entirely
If you say
hypothetically,
no, it'll be very
because
funny.
one of the things that really hurt with the bad reviews is like, if it's just me on stage, who cares? Like, I can make another show, but the feeling that I led a team of like whatever 10 people into a piece of turd, like that, I was just like, that was difficult, and that is still difficult. And just for the interest of being on a podcast and having like actually delving into something that's more challenging, I'm curious how you felt about reading like some pretty definitely not good reviews, being on a show, and like what your experience of that was.
Almost, I think, because we are in it and we have been there every step of, well, not every step of the way, but like we were there from that first day in rehearsal to that last beat of applause on that Saturday night, I guess that's in a way built like a confidence in me about the show. Like I felt fairly confident about what we were offering. Like I mean, the beginning of the week when we came in and Jamal had injured himself and everybody was quite stressed about how we were going to present something, I said very confident, I was like, everything is gonna go so smoothly. I was like, we have nothing to worry about. We're gonna figure it out. We've got a great team. We'll be fine. And like there was a part of me that was like, I don't know what energy I'm on, but I was like, maybe this is just like I'm a little bit sleep deprived and I'm just kind of like throwing it out there, like let the universe take hold, you know. But also I genuinely had so much faith in our team and in what we've made and in the show itself that when the reviews came out, I felt kind of like I could just kind of hold my own. I'm like, sure, I hear you. You know what? I could kind of see that. But also from the inside, I'm like, I'm proud of what we did. And I don't think anything anyone said about how they felt about it would change how it felt to perform it with the people that we were with on stage, knowing everything that went into it into the version we made at Leicester and then the version we made at the place. You know, like having all of that context, I was like, come at me. Well, not really, but also, yeah, that was the feeling.
Well, that's good to know. And I know I struggle sometimes as a director who's made a work for a number of years with the fact like people are entrusting me with a modest but also a significant amount of money to do something, and the pressure for it to be good, and how to also take care of the people who are in it, make sure that they feel good about what they're doing and that it's valuable to them. It's like, yeah, it's definitely something I'm trying to figure out.
I think also like the fact that you're even cognizant of that means that it won't be bad. You know what I mean? It's like there's some like it's like not in this context, but like stupid people don't tend to know they're stupid, right? It's like if you question like, am I stupid? You're probably not stupid, right? So it's like kind of like that with this. It's like the people that are out there, that are like just, you know, pissing away people's money and not caring about their dancers and not worrying about, you know, creating a good environment for them. Like as long as you're questioning that, it probably means you are, because like it's not just you. You know, when you ask yourself those questions of like, how do I make sure this show's good? How do I take care of my dancers? Yes, you'll come up with like big, solid answers of like, okay, let me make sure I do this. Let me make sure I do this. But that tendency to question it will also come through in your day-to-day behaviors. Like I can't imagine you, even just hearing you say that now, obviously I've known you a bit more, but like even just hearing you say that now, I now can't imagine you walk into a rehearsal with them, making a decision and not giving a shit what they think. Like your tendency probably is to go, but let me also consider, is this asking too much of the dancers? Is this wasting money? Is it, you know what I mean? And is this wasting people's time or whatever? And I think, yeah, if this can help at all, I think you're probably fine just based on the fact that you wonder if you're fine, you know?
Yeah, maybe, but there's not.
I'm not to say like, you know, say fuck it and I'm fine, I don't have to think about them, but maybe just to, I don't know, like you shouldn't feel negative about it, I don't think.
I do know at least one choreographer who is challenging to work with, and a part of
one
that,
choreographer that's challenging, there's billions.
Yes, there's
all of them.
There's one person who I've had experience with who is also like genius, and a part of their genius I think is that they are very single-minded.
I wonder if we're thinking of the same person
in their vision and how they want that vision to be done. And sometimes I do wonder, like, if I'm being too, not too considerate, but just like not having enough madness maybe. There's also
There's definitely a balance.
There's also these wonderful models now in hip hop dance and hip hop theater of incredible work. Botaseva, Ivan Blackstock, Dixon, like the list it goes on. And a part of me is like, why didn't I just like kind of not imitate, but like use the stuff that they've already learnt more? Like there's...
How do you mean?
Like there's certain things that they're doing that is successful, like on stage, and like I don't know, I could hired more dancers and do more like unison stuff in a certain way, or if I'm going interdisciplinary, I could have incorporated, like Ivan Blackstock, more elements, had a more coherent vision in the way that Ivan Blackstock has been able to find that over a number of years. I was very aware doing Saving Face that I was specifically not looking at anyone else's work, and I wonder also if I should have done more.
For me personally, the fact that it's not like any of their work is why I put you on the level of their work, because it's like I've seen plenty of pieces that I'm like, oh, this is just Baby Black Dog, you know. It's like, or even elements
such a
of it.
temptation to do that. In the same way with dancers, like you see incredible dancers, and then you're like, that's how to be good.
Yep.
But it's not. But I don't necessarily think that that's true, in the sense that like that's not how to be good. What I think we kind of miss, whatever the expression is, miss the forest for the trees or whatever, is that you see someone that gets good and you're like, oh, that's how to be good. But what you don't see is that they filled a hole that was unfilled before they did that thing. So the reason Black Dog is good is because nobody had done Black Dog before Black Dog. So if you do Black Dog now, yes, you're doing the thing that got him good, but actually what it was filling that gap. There's no saving face. I haven't seen a hip hop theater show like that, right? So that's, I think, if you stick with this and refine it, that's what's going to make that show as successful as Trap Lord or any of those, because it's another show that is filling a gap that has never been filled, I think. And doing the only thing that I could, well, I mean, I also admittedly don't have the most extensive knowledge of all theatre, especially outside of hip hop, but there's a show I saw at Sadler's, I think it was Punch Drunk.
Oh God. Yeah.
Did you watch that? The triple bill where Crystal Pite did her one. It was Crystal Pite, I think Punch Drunk, and then there was,
I know Punch Drunk's work,
but it was, it's the first thing I've seen, but they did something where, and the reason I compare it to yours is because they did this thing where it was like very pedestrian characters, like it was a guy in a business suit and this other thing and this other thing, and they kind of went from pedestrian movements into like dance stuff, and you almost didn't see it coming, and then they snapped back in. Very, for me, unclear narrative and just a bit abstract and weird, but in that same way of like, you're taking this thing and turning it surreal. That's the only thing I can even think of comparing yours to. In the hip-hop theater scene, there's nothing. So I think, as much as like there's, I understand the temptation for sure, but it's also like, I think again, personally, my opinion is like, resisting that is what's gonna make it work for me. Like, keep it, like, falling into that temptation is kind of like falling into the river that everyone else is in. It's like everybody's doing that. You go to like any, you know, hip hop show and it's like unison, some backflips and whatever else it is, and it's like, even those elements in Black Dog, I mean, I did an hour on Black Dog when I first saw it on the pod by myself. But like, if anything I would criticize about Black Dog, it is those unison elements, and it's like it not taking enough risks with what the choreo is in that. And I think, I mean, even the amount of like having less dancing is a big risk, and the way that you like, even the temptation is, okay, you have a breaking solo right at the beginning. Breakings are just like a solo that you use breaking in. The temptation would have been, let me impress the audience and let me do all the stuff that I can do and all the cool, and I've seen you move and you can do some really impressive shit. But what you did do, which I was like, that's why I love this show already, is like, you only use the stuff that was useful to progress the narrative. And it's like, for me, that's you resisting this urge to like, oh, let me give the people what they want. I just want to see me do like 90s, or they want to see me do a backflip. And you didn't, you just did moves that aren't like somewhat abstract. They're not even breaking really. And there's like certain things where you're giving the paper and going, like all of these things where I was like, I'm so glad that's such a mature, smart, like what do you call that? Like you're making a choice that's based in like, no, this is what I want to do for the story I want to tell, not this is what you're going to want to see, you know? So if my vote counts for anything, I think you resisting that is one of the more brilliant aspects of that show.
Well, thanks. We'll see when I make Saving Face / Black Dog 2. Black Dog Returns.
Yeah. Then I'll have stuff to criticize. Yeah.
I have one other question.
Go on.
So ambitious
This is
to
fun.
make a show which is like both theater and dance. What do you think about Saving Face the musical and
Ooh.
getting these guys to sing also?
Can you sing?
Well, no.
Well, you said that about acting.
Yeah. If you can sing as well as you can act, I'm in.
I honestly can't. I can carry a tune.
I'm gonna
Okay.
trick you guys. I'll be like, there's gonna be minimal singing, like
Oh, boy.
just 1 or 2 notes.
Yeah.
Pulls out the paper and it rolls out.
The words were, there'll be more dancing than anything else.
That's what you said? What a liar.
I said that we'd be devising, and that was the plan.
Yep. The plan.
I am not a massive fan of musicals, to be honest with you. I don't know why. I just don't like them. But I haven't been to see that many. So I try and
There's
keep an open mind.
Cabaret is actually really, really good, and Julia Chung,
I heard, yeah.
was a
I did hear
choreographer.
that. We spoke about that on the pod, actually.
like really good. And again, it's like I think when it's just a good story,
Yeah.
it's good. And then Oklahoma, it's like a very old musical, but they've like put a really interesting modern twist on it, which
Okay.
actually to the point that actually some older generation people walked out because they're like, this is not what I know. This is not what I know and love.
Would you consider La La Land the movie? Is that a musical?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
But I like that.
Well, yeah.
Does that count?
Also, like arguably Disney films.
To some
Yeah, I'm
extent.
not a massive fan of Disney films.
Oh, fair enough.
But this is also, I also have a traumatic experience from going to musical theatre college, so which I hated. So that plays a lot into it. But bro, I mean also this is the thing about any art thing, but it's like if your gut is telling you that's the right way to go,
I have no idea.
maybe try it.
I'm not actually going to make it a musical, although just because it makes me laugh, the idea of trying to turn it into a musical.
With the exact same cast, none of us trained.
Exactly.
All of us on stage.
That would be hilarious.
Just like literally tricking them into it, just like bit by bit, getting them to sing more, and then be like, I don't know about this. I think you should
Before
find
you
someone
know
else.
it, we're
Like,
in
no.
full belt.
Yeah.
Like having a Tomorrow and Annie moment.
Yeah. That sounds funny to me. Like at some point, everybody like tomorrow.
Well, I think
I don't know.
like a comedy musical could be funny.
Yeah.
Maybe there's certain things that would like delivered in. There's a couple of comedians that use song. I think Bo Burnham does some
Oh,
song.
Bo Burnham.
Yeah,
Amazing.
and it's like I don't really like that type of thing. But then when it's
When
comedy,
it's
I'm
funny,
like,
yeah.
that's actually not bad.
I won't be making it into a musical. Just for all you musical lovers out there, that's not happening. Just for the record.
Yet we'll see.
But yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this has been another long one. But yeah, I mean, again, just like I'm really, and this is like, I mean, for people that listen to the Capsule every week, they will know that I criticize when I can, and I'm not just trying to be nice for the sake of it. Like, I really wanted to pick it apart, and I really genuinely enjoyed it. I genuinely laughed. And I was still, there's certain bits where like the narrative have progressed and I was still watching you at the back, like doing some facials or something. And I was like still laughing. I was like, and like my partner was sitting, she's like, she's your favorite. And I was like, yeah, she's great. But like, it's just like, it genuinely made me laugh all the bits. And it wasn't even just, you being funny in the back that made me laugh. It was like the bits that were supposed to make me laugh, made me laugh. I've really enjoyed the dancing. Obviously that's kind of a given. You guys are all great, but I enjoyed the dancing in it. I thought it was really well choreographed, really, really well directed. I loved the way it was written, even though the other reviewer didn't. Yeah, I loved the way you balance all the relationships and stuff. I just think it's a really entertaining show. And that's the other thing is like, what you said about, this is my last point, I promise. But like, what you said about like blowing people away and stuff. It's like, this is what irritates me. Cause it's like, I go to watch some shows and I'm like, I don't even feel like you want me to have a good time.
Oh,
like,
yeah, that's
you're
weird.
trying to bore me, or you're trying to like make me depressed, or you're trying to. It's like this is the most like. It's like, I know I just said like stillness is important and stuff, but it's like, all right, now we're standing still for way too long, and you're just looking over there, and it's like, just entertain me a little bit, And I get there's a whole argument. And I've had this argument. I had it with Kenrick and Tally ages ago on one of the pods, but that they were like, oh, I create for me, not the audience. And I say, for me, it's 50-50. It's like, I want to put what I want to put out there, but I also want to consider what the audience will like about that and meet them in the middle somewhere. And I think that's what yours did, where it's like you had a story to tell and a message you want to get across, sure. And that was like, I don't really have a relation to that, but you communicated it to me. But you also made sure I had a good time before I left. You made sure I laughed. You made sure I understood what was going on, didn't feel alienated, which is another thing we do a lot in theatre and in art in general, is it's I'm going to do this really obscure thing. And if you don't get it, that's because you don't understand art. You know, it's like a lot of contemporary shows, I find that. It's like it creates this almost invisible barrier where it's like, oh, well, if you walk out of here saying you didn't like it, it's probably because you don't know contemporary dance. And it's like, with yours, it's like, even if you didn't give a shit about any of the other stuff, the message, the technique, the anything, it's like, I walked out, at least bare minimum, I understood what happened. I understood the story, you know, and then I also laughed a bit. And it's like you made sure, I think, everyone in there had a good time for various levels of depth. Like you said, you had people in the post-show talk saying about you said, I don't know what.
About like being movement impaired and also living with like chronic pain.
And they really connected to that side. I didn't connect to that at all. Like I
thought that was rubbish.
No, not that I didn't like it.
Yeah.
There's nothing that I saw. Maybe Jamal's thing with his dad, because my dad passed and I had that's a tough subject for me. So I was like, okay, there's a little bit of like, there's something happening in here for that. But with like, let's say, for example, your character, I didn't go, oh, I know how that feels. Or, oh, like, it was just like, oh, cool. This is like an element of the story that I'm experiencing, you know, like working in an office. I never really worked in an office. So I didn't connect with that in the sense of, oh, I know what that feels like. But it still was communicated to me well. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, you made me care about working in an office in the same way that you made me care about the autoimmune disease. You made me care about all the different, like OCD and all the different things, which is what you're supposed to do. It's like, don't just go, there's this thing and you have to care about it. It's like, make me care about it, communicate it to me well, which you did. And it's like something that could have made me feel alienated, didn't. It made me feel like I want to know more and I want to care about it. And I think that's the storytelling. It's because you're a good storyteller.
Thanks.
So yeah, I always want to make sure, as much as people think I'm negative and say bad things, as much as I criticize, I also want to, you know, give people props when I think it's due and when I think they've done a fucking good job. So both of you guys, I'm so glad you could be here as well. Because, you know, we spoke about being on the pod and it was kind of a last minute thing. I was like, can you get but yeah, I'm so glad you could be here as well. And also shout out to Jamal and Yuki, who did an amazing job. I thought it was a great cast. So yeah, just massive shout out to you guys. I just have a lot of good things to say about that. I hope that you get a chance to do more with it. I'd love to see it when it comes back. I recommend, if it comes back, guys, go and check it out. And yeah.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Thank you.
Anything on the like future horizon that we can let people know? Or just keep an eye on your pages?
This has definitely kind of been my whole world for the last few months. And I literally don't think about the day after the last show until it happens.
Yeah.
I'm here again. I am doing puppetry in my neighbor Totoro, most likely. So come check that out. It's a really lovely show. Definitely fun for both adults and younger generation. They have I can't remember what they're called, but like relaxed performances. So literally, because I have a lot of friends who have kids now, and they're like, oh, we want to come, but you know, it's difficult. It's like, there's a few performances where you can literally bring babies and they can cry all the way through.
It's like not supposed to be so.
Yeah, and there's more house lights up, or
nice.
You know, if you have any other kind of neurodiversity or stuff like that, you can also come on those evenings. So yeah, I highly recommend. It's a really lovely show.
Anything
what are you up to?
Coming up for you that we can check you out?
Well, actually, tomorrow I'm gonna be rehearsing the album School Edition, which is the show that Yuki made with Sarah Golding.
Okay.
And I am in it. It is going to, I think, Bath and Basingstoke next week.
Oh, is that an outdoor show?
Yeah.
I wonder if we'll catch you on any of the shows, like, because we're doing outdoor touring this summer as well.
Oh, also working with Autumn Dance Theatre. So we're going to a bunch of festivals, and I'll almost definitely see you at one.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be at. I find, who was it last year we were touring? Elsa was in a company. I forget the name who it was. You know, Elsa Bet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we we kept seeing it. We saw on like 3 or 4 different tour dates. They were all on the same one. But yeah. So yeah, hopefully we'll bump into each other. I'll definitely get to. That's the other benefit is like when there's people I know, I can actually watch their show if we're in the same festival. You know.
Yeah.
So we'll compare schedule notes.
Yes, we will. We will do.
But yeah, so check these guys out if you haven't seen them already. I know if you haven't seen the show, this is a whole lot to talk about a show you haven't seen, but if it comes back,
it's been a fairly long one as well. So I'm like, if you've got this far,
yes,
Yeah.
and there are some people that
well.
watch like every episode, which is good. Shout out to you guys, we love you. But hopefully there was enough talking there about other elements that will be useful. And if the show ever does come back, I'm definitely going to repurpose some of this content to coincide with that.
Oh, thanks, man.
But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. I will catch you soon. I don't know when this was out. We will get back to our kind of regularly scheduled probably next week. I want to talk about European games. If this comes out soon, I want to talk about European games. I want to talk about, there's so many things that happened. But yeah, did you watch European games?
Not yet.
Good stuff. Shout out to Kram and Sunny and Stephanie and Vanessa. We love you all. And I think that's it. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe, like, all the stuff that YouTubers say. And love you, everyone. Catch you soon. Peace.
Peace.
How you do that?